you hear me? Give a thumbs up if you can hear me. Perfect. Okay. Call this meeting to order. It is August the 30th, a Monday, a council agenda, and I will call this meeting to order, and we'll go and do a roll call and an audio check. Councillor Foster?
Present.
Councillor VanLeeuwen?
Present.
Councillor McElwain?
Present.
Councillor Kittredge?
Present.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Here.
And Councillor McCrae?
Here.
Good, everybody's loud and clear too. So we have an addendum or a correction to the agenda, and that is the Integrity Commission report on the inquiry, VanLeeuwen inquiry. So I'm going to put a suggestion out there that we move that up in the agenda right before my my county council report, right after Ed O'Shaughnessy's petition, his announcement, because I don't want our delegation to be waiting around. So if we can do that and have receive that report at that point, is everybody okay with that? Okay, good. Disclosure of pecuniary interests under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Okay, seeing none. Approval of and adoption of minutes from Council July 26. Recommendation that the minutes of the council meeting held July 26, 2021 be adopted as circulated. Mover for that, please. Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor VanLeeuwen. Any discussion on those minutes? All in favor? And those are approved. Moving right to our presentations and announcements, we have Ed here with a petition regarding David Street Bridge reconstruction project. And thanks very much, Ed, for putting all the work and the thought that you have into your report and your petition here. So I'm going to turn things over to you, and you can take it from there. Welcome, Ed.
Okay, thank you very much. Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, you're loud and clear, Ed.
Okay, very good. Well, good afternoon, Mayor Linton, members of council and township staff. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. I am here to present council with a community petition and to ask you to reconsider a decision that was made at the June 21st committee meeting to move forward with option 4 for adding separated bike lanes along St. David Street. When the public survey was communicated through local media and on posted signs in downtown Fergus, I thought this was a great opportunity to improve this area of downtown and also to gain input from the local community. After the results were published and presented to council, I was somewhat surprised when I read that council had unanimously voted to move forward with option 4. So I had to find out some more information about why the option was selected. What I found was that 80% of respondents selected an option that did not include bike lanes, but chose options that were focused on expanding sidewalks and improving boulevards. 69% of survey respondents selected an option that did not include the removal of parking and that is important to local businesses, sorry. And in terms of importance for reshaping the St. David Street area, improving traffic flow, maintaining parking, visual appearance, and expanded sidewalks all ranked higher than adding the bike lanes. I also read articles in the local media and in the Toronto Star that indicated that several of our local businesses were not in agreement with the selection of option 4. Plus, I also reviewed township reports, in particular IS 2021-10 and IS 2021-13, which were related to the final recommendation. And I also watched the committee meeting where this final decision was made. After reviewing all of this, I was somewhat confused by the decision and decided it was necessary to provide a voice for the local community. So I started the petition to get some feedback. Initially, I was not sure how much feedback we would get through the petition, but within a short period, the petition neared the 500 signature mark. At that point, the local media contacted me and I was interviewed by both the Wellington Advertiser and Elora Fergus Today, both of whom published articles about the petition. And in the weeks that followed the publication of these articles, The petition has now passed 1,000 signatures. And the feedback from the petition for me has been very clear. They believe that their input on the public survey was ignored in this process. They are also concerned about removing parking spaces and the impact that this will have on local businesses. And they also believe that adding bike lanes to a provincial highway is not safe and is not the right location. There was some good debate between proponents and objectives to adding the bike lanes on St. David Street. But what I observed every time I shared the petition online was that the objectives always greatly outnumbered the proponents. What I thought this told me was that the reasons for the decision were not clear and were not effectively communicated to the general public. I am aware of and understand that the township's transportation master plan includes objectives to improve active transportation in our community. And as a daily walker myself and an occasional cyclist, I do support these objectives. However, like many people who signed the petition, I still believe that St. David Street is not the right location or the safest place to start this. I'm not sure if any council members have taken the time to sit at the corner of St. David Street and St. Andrew Street to watch traffic. My wife and I have done this 3 times over the last month. We sat on 3 separate days and recorded trucks and large trailers that were going north and south along St. David Street. And our findings were as follows. On July 30th, between 1:40 and 2:20 p.m., we observed 39 trucks and trailers going north and south. On August the 12th, between 11:55 a.m. and 12:55 p.m., we observed 46 trucks and trailers going north and south. And on August the 27th, between 12:30 and 1:20 p.m., we observed 54 trucks and trailers going north and south. Over those 3 days, in an approximate 2.5-hour time span, that's 1 truck or trailer every 65 seconds. Needless to say, and I'm sure council appreciate this, that truck traffic along this stretch is still very busy. I appreciate that these are not easy decisions for council, but without an effective bypass route to route this traffic around Centre Wellington and other communities, plus the continued growth of our community, I don't think we are going to see true traffic calming along this stretch of highway. In fact, I believe it will be the opposite. Driver habits are difficult to change, and despite an attempt to reroute truck traffic to bring trucks along St. David Street, I think GPS is always going to bring them in that direction. It's also concerning that an attempt to move some of this traffic to another part of our community has created a problem in that area too. I also know that Provo Lane was part of the discussion as an alternative bike route throughout this process. And I do believe that this road, or perhaps a combination of Provo Lane and Maiden Lane as a one-way loop system between Hill Street and St. Andrew Street, might also be a good option to review. Because of where we live and walk, we see cyclists using these routes to navigate the downtown area all the time. And the end of Provo Lane may also provide an opportunity to add bike parking, which I know is a concern for local cycle groups as well. In closing, I would like to say that I have been encouraged by the feedback I've received through this process, not only through the petition, but also from local business owners, people who have called me, stopped by our house, and have stopped me in local stores and restaurants to thank me for speaking up and bringing these concerns to council. And so in presenting this petition with a list of over 1,000 signatures and a summary of comments and feedback, I believe that there is widespread opposition to the idea of adding these bike lanes along St. David Street. And so I ask council to consider why 80% of survey respondents believe their input was not considered in this decision. Why, if the improvement of active transportation was a clear objective, the public survey included options that did not support a complete streets option. Why more than 1,000 people from our local community and surrounding area do not believe option 4 is the best option? And how safe will it be for cyclists to navigate across St. David Street Bridge or through the downtown area when they come to the corner of St. David and St. Andrew Streets. I also hope that council took the time to review the examples I shared where other communities in Guelph, Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, and Burlington have added bike lanes or piloted them in roadways that were not the best option. And in each case, these bike lanes were either removed or decisions made not to move forward. The project in Burlington is particularly interesting because it closely aligns with the St. David Street project, and it may just provide a look into our future. So based on all of this feedback and in accordance with Bylaw 2021-31, Section 7.2, I ask council to think about these concerns, listen to the voice of your community, and to reconsider your decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed, and I also thank you for the time and the effort that you put into this. It's very clear from the attached documentation that you spent a lot of time on this and had a lot of conversations. So that's part of the political process.
Thank
and
you.
Appreciate you doing that as a citizen. I really do. I'm going to give councillors the opportunity to ask any questions that they have or suggest some comments, and I'll start with Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a number of comments. As you all well know, this is in the heart of Ward 3, the ward that I represent. I'd firstly like to thank Mr. O'Shaughnessy for this work as well. Mayor, he's done a lot of work on this. He's done it in an objective and a fair manner. 1,000 people or more have signed it. And I think, Mayor, it confirms what I have heard via telephone and via email, and that is there's widespread opposition. And let me be very clear, there's widespread opposition to bike lanes on St. David. I think a lot of people want to see bike lanes somewhere, in many places as a matter of fact, but I think we're starting in the wrong place. The busiest roadway in center Wellington is St. David Street, and here we are starting with a new cycling infrastructure, which I'm fully supportive of generally, but we're starting it on the busiest highway in the township. And so this petition confirms what I've come to realize since the decision was taken, that there is widespread public opposition to bike lanes on St. David. A number of my constituents have pointed out how there's many other alternative routes, Provost Lane being one, which I also think is worth a look. There's many other north-south routes such as Gowrie Street, Tower. There's many other alternatives to bike lanes on St. David. And in particular, I really would like to see the two trailheads connect from east to west through north central Fergus. I think that is a really good place to start to connect the two trailways. So with all of the above, you know, I also note that this plan for bike lanes on St. David starts downtown and ends in the North Commercial District, but effectively there's two bottlenecks, one to the south being the narrow and busy bridge, and one to the north being a very busy commercial corridor. So effectively we're connecting two bottleneck places with these bike lanes on St. David. I also, as I raised in the meeting, I note that the province may not even approve this. They have at least some jurisdiction on the highway, and we haven't really gotten a clear answer to what the province's position will be to having bike lanes on a provincial highway, or a connecting link as it's known. Thirdly, I've since learned that the Connecting Link funding program is likely not going to fund bike lanes, and that is effectively what a large part of the motion we voted on. And most importantly today, Mayor, we're hearing carte blanche from over 1,000 citizens that we have probably erred in this decision. And with all of the foregoing, I'd like to make a motion that we reconsider our decision and have a second look, including a full look at other options, other streets, other routes. I would like to see bike lanes generally, but I think we have erred in our decision to start a new set of cycling infrastructure on the busiest highway in center Wellington. I believe it's the wrong place to get started, and there are superior options to start an important initiative for active transportation. Mayor, I've made a motion to reconsider this decision.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Foster. We're going to go around and then I'll get to you and your motion as the first point of order after we go around and hear from all the councillors. Councillor VanLeeuwen?
Thanks, Mayor, and I appreciate the work that you've done, Mr. Shaughnessy. It's incredible to hear from the people and to see what is the best direction for Center Wellington. It's interesting when we read documents, we go through items, we look, a lot of times we look at the numbers, and especially when we're doing a project, we really want to pair things in to get it all done. But this is where engagement matters the most. It's incredible to see the engagement that's come out of this. I'm impressed, and I'm also very thankful because it does matter. Just short of repeating everything that Councillor Foster had said in regards to other options and other ways, I think that the community itself deserves us taking another look at this. And there's nothing wrong with looking at ourselves, and if we have erred and if we find a better plan, then let's take a look at that. But I think I have no problem seconding Councillor Foster's motion when it comes up, and I hope that we can have a good discussion when that time comes. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor VanLeeuwen. Councillor MacLean?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I pretty much agree with both Councillor Foster and Councillor VanLeeuwen. I must say I actually felt guilty for voting the way I did within 2 days of the vote last time around. I think as soon as I started hearing public feedback, because I realized that we really hadn't considered all of the ramifications of our decisions. So very much in support of reconsidering the whole decision.
Councillor, thanks, Councillor MacLean. Councillor Kittrus?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Shaughnessy, for coming and for presenting to Council such a detailed and rigorous survey and information. When the decision was made, I was not aware of that information. I made the information from what the staff had said. I was very concerned about the cost, and I had suggested Provost Lane from the very beginning when this discussion was happening, and it was ignored. And it just said we had these 4 options, and basically 3 of the options are spend between $3 and $4 million on St. David Street, which is the busiest road, or do nothing. And of course, I support bike lanes and a bike plan, really. I supported, though, when the presentation was made for the Wellington Loop by the bike advocate, John Scott. I supported that. And I believe that Fergus has a great potential of having alternative roads used for bike lanes, not the busiest roads. I've been to Holland and I've driven bicycles. They don't put them on heavy highways with lots of truck, as you have said, our highway St. David Street has. So I just feel that I support Councillor Foster and to reconsider this and really consider, like Provost. Provost goes from a really nice park down to the library, and that's another hub of the community. And if we could probably spend like 1/40th of the amounts of money for the same mileage, make it a one-way and have 2 lanes and just try it out. And but to spend the amount of money and possibly not getting the funding, I was waiting for this to maybe come to budget so that maybe we could again have this discussion. So I'm really thankful that you came, and that all the emails I received, I told them how I felt about it. I wasn't really certain. And so I would support Councillor Foster's recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Kittredge. Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Your Worship. Ed, I want to thank you for all the information you brought forward and the work that you did. And the problem with these surveys that we do is the number of people that respond to them, and we use the percentage of the people that respond to them as being the percentage of the general public. And that's never the case, because there isn't 100% of people responding to those. And so it always creates this uproar. I've received a lot of phone calls and emails on this matter as well, but I guess I'm the only one who's getting them from the opposite side. But I want to go back to the reason that we went down this rabbit hole in the first place, and that was because the provincial government put funding out there for the redevelopment of roads. And we looked at that as an opportunity to take the master transportation plan and put it in effect using the province's money. Now, Councillor Foster says he doesn't believe that they would support that and support bike lanes. So we haven't heard from the province yet. And if they didn't, then we could revisit the issue then. It is imperative that we find different ways to get the community into the downtown core. When I look at the smaller communities that had amalgamation forced upon them decades ago, they're now fighting to get bike lanes into their downtown core at a great expense. And here we are on the cusp of growing, and we're trying to be forward thinking. I get that it's a busy road. Narrowing that visually slows the trucks down. One thing I've come to realize in the discussion we've had about transportation and trucks and truck bypasses and alternate truck routes is that every time you do something, you create a problem somewhere else. It is going to be impossible for us to get a truck bypass through this town, so we need to make it as inconvenient for trucks so that they slow down and drive within the rules throughout this community to make it safer. And putting in bike lanes that have a barrier is the way to go. So I appreciate the input. And sometimes I think we have to be a little bit forward thinking and think 15 years down the road. If the province doesn't support it, we'll revisit it then. But I think we need to move forward with the province's money on this.
Thanks, Councillor Dunsmore. Councillor McCrae?
Thank you, Mr. Shaughnessy, for encouraging this discussion. I agree with you. We could have done better in explaining option 4. That includes wide sidewalks, street trees, and bike lanes. Its anticipated benefit to local business and the process that led to our ultimate decision. I'll share with you my process and reason for supporting option 4. I dislike surveys, preferring public meetings where residents, councillors, staff, and consultants can meet to review and discuss proposed infrastructure changes. Unfortunately, COVID has put these public meetings on hold, many of which were held at the Fergus Sportsplex. The challenge with only receiving a like or dislike on a survey is how much weight to give it compared to detailed explanations supporting a like or dislike, or detailed email, letters, and comments, meetings with various stakeholders, and research material. What we decide today has a bearing on what we want to achieve as a small city of 52,000 people in 20 years. How do we continue to attract people to our downtowns? I am looking at the impact of increasing residential sprawl that can gut downtowns as residents move further out and seek more convenient box stores, restaurants, and malls. We have to consider a street design that is universally accessible for people of all ages and abilities. How we design our roads, how safe people feel using them, impacts how people choose to get around and where they are willing to visit. We have to plan our downtowns to be a destination people are eager to seek and live. It's not feasible to expand or widen St. David Street to allow more vehicles. Instead, we have to consider how to use it better and allocate the limited space available. We implemented a 3-hour parking pilot project to encourage more significant turnover to utilize better the downtown parking we have. Several national and international studies identified increased commercial sales of 7% to 400% associated with improved pedestrian and cycling accessibility to downtowns. Installing and maintaining active transportation infrastructure is less costly than its vehicle counterpart. To summarize, I reviewed all the survey feedback that formed part of my decision process and the other information I received, my meetings with members of the public, and my research. As you rightly pointed out in your July 6, 2021 petition update, Many elements and parties are involved in the selection process. I encourage everyone in our community to be looking out 20 years when you respond to a survey or attend a public information meeting. Fact is, we are going to be a large city in 20 years, and we have to start thinking about what that's going to look like. Most importantly, share your reasoning for your position to help us better understand your point of view.
Thanks, councillors. Just a couple of comments from myself. Again, I want to thank Ed for the work that you've done on this. It's significant, and I appreciate it. We all had all the information that we needed last time when we voted on this. Nothing's really changed. The options were put forward, so in no way did staff not provide all the information. So, and we did vote on that. To me, it's important that we're building our roads for future use, not for current use. And I think it's absolutely critical that we start having a spine that is conducive for active transportation, for bike, cycle lanes in downtown Fergus. I think it's important. So nothing's really changed for me. Surveys, going out for engagement. We said right from day one that this is one of the several methods that we're going to be moving forward on to get input from our community. But sometimes when you're looking at something in the future, you have to make some decisions based on what this is going to be like in 2041 versus what it's going to be like in 2021. And I really do think this is a visionary approach to building complete streets. And I think our staff laid out the options and the rationale behind them. And my vote wouldn't change on that because I do think it is the right decision and it's the most forward-thinking decision. So that's the only comments I have right now. And I know that we have a motion that Councillor Foster wants to put forward. So people have been speaking to that. So I'll turn it over to Councillor Foster if you do want to move that motion right now.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. I'd like to make a motion that we reconsider the decision made with respect to this matter, and that we take a fulsome look at other alternatives for bike lane infrastructure in our community.
Okay, so you've moved that motion. Can I get a seconder for that motion to reconsider? Councillor VanLeeuwen, and I'd like to turn it, before we take a vote on this, I'd like to turn it over to our clerk because there's a little bit different rules when it comes to a motion to reconsider versus a regular motion. So I want to make sure that we're all clear on what the rule is to reconsider something we've already decided on. So I'll turn it over to Carrie.
Thank you. Through Mayor Linton, a member who has voted on the prevailing side may bring forward a notice of motion to reconsider at a subsequent meeting, a motion to reconsider. And it also requires 2/3 majority vote. So just know that the appropriate thing to do in this situation would be to give notice of reconsideration and reconsider at a future meeting.
So currently the motion on the floor is to reconsider right now. If we have a mover and a seconder to reconsider right now, what our clerk is saying a more appropriate way would be to move a notice to reconsider at a future date. So I'm asking the mover and the seconder if they change their motion or if they want to stick to what they have already put there on the floor. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. Would I be correct that if council votes to hear the motion today, we can waive that notice and we can consider the matter today?
Yes.
Do we need a formal waiver of notice?
That would be the appropriate thing to do through Mayor Linton as you would be not in line with your procedural bylaw that we just passed.
So the first motion then would be a motion to waive our procedural bylaw to not require notice. Okay.
On this
Does
matter?
anybody want to make that motion? Councillor Foster?
Yeah.
So you're
Thank you,
making,
Mayor. Yes, I would make the motion that we waive notice today and consider this matter to reconsider today.
okay. Can I have a seconder to waive that notice? Okay, so the motion to deal with the motion to waive the notice does not get a seconder, so it has been defeated. So now I'm not sure what we do right now. I'm gonna have to confer with our clerk for a second. So based on what we just didn't pass, the motion as it stands is now out of order because we can't deal with this without notice. So I declare that motion out of order. And unless there's another motion, then we have to go on with the meeting. So I'll ask councillors what their wishes right now. Councillor VanLeeuwen.
Thanks, Mayor. Can we not make a notice of motion that we reconsider the previous decision in regards to Highway 6, and then also request in that notice of motion, request staff to come forward with alternate routes? The reason I request that is this gives us an opportunity that when we do get to the next meeting, we have some information to work with as well.
So I'm gonna before we put that forward, I don't know what kind of work that is, workload, if it's just basically what staff has already provided with us, or if it's net new work that our staff are going to have to do. So I'm gonna ask both Andy and Colin to speak to that, because we have to know what this motion is gonna require. Andy? Okay, so Andy's going to try to fix his mic, and I'm going to allow Colin to speak for a second. Colin, do you see any extra work involved on this, or would it be just going back to the options we've already laid out?
Yeah, through in response to that, Mayor Linton. So yeah, we're looking at like we didn't look at establishing on Provo or Gowrie or some of the other parallel streets. So the feasibility of that, like those are obviously much narrower streets, and the feasibility of putting bike lanes on those streets, it just may not be possible. Without doing perhaps what Councillor Kittredge suggested, looking at a one-way option, which might be a little bit confusing. We don't have a lot of one-way streets locally, so to do that might be a little bit confusing to drivers and create some further hazards. But yeah, I think if we're directed to do additional work in evaluating other north-south options, yeah, we would have to. It's not really encompassed in the options that were brought forward, option 1 through 4, through the previous report. So we'd be effectively starting from kind of square one.
And so, Colin, how would that impact our application that's already gone into connecting links that deals with this already?
Yeah, so we haven't submitted the application yet. We're just in the final stages of finalizing the detailed design to support the application, and so if council wishes to change direction, obviously that puts the process on hold until we have certainty as to what that detailed or what option to move forward with. It's not just I think selecting an alternate alignment, north-south alignment, it's also going back to those options and selecting a preferred 1 through 4 option again. So it's kind of a two-piece, that two pieces that staff would need direction on in order to proceed with that connecting link option.
Councillor VanLeeuwen?
Thanks, Mayor. From what I understand, a notice of motion, there's no discussion. So if there was brought forward a notice of motion today, it quite frankly, it's not relevant whether there's extra costs applied to the discussion or not. We would then receive that notice of motion just as we received Councillor McElwain's notice of motion. We didn't look at the cost of doing or working through anything in regards to his notice of motion. But what we would do is have that discussion at that time. And the discussion that we're currently having with staff would be us beginning the discussion right here by waiving the notice. So as possibly a point of order, I think we have an option to accept the notice of motion, or we shouldn't be having a conversation about the work that would entail because we're waiving the notice. Thanks.
Point of order, Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Foster. What's your point of order?
Thank you, Mayor. My point of order is that this item is on our agenda, and I don't believe notice is required. The item is on our agenda, and therefore my motion to reconsider ought to stand. There's no notice required. It's on our agenda, sir.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to recess. Some important points have been made here. I'm gonna have to recess and chat with the clerk about making sure we're doing this in an appropriate way. Take 5, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. And hopefully by then Andy's mic is gonna be working again. So they made a good point.
It's a community delegation. Normally, you don't take any action on a community delegation. So the fact that we spent the last half an hour on a community delegation, we shouldn't have done. We should have thanked him very much for
Okay, it's 1:45. Everybody back on, just making sure that everybody's picture is back on. Okay, so I had a discussion with our clerk and our CAO, and just want to make sure that we're doing things appropriately. So the reason that we should have notice for something of this magnitude is because we have to make sure that the community is aware of this decision. It's a big decision. It's a decision that is different than, potentially different than the decision that council made unanimously. The community deserves to have notice that we're having this discussion. And so as a principle of open government, it's really important for us to have notice. The second piece is nobody seconded that motion to waive the notice requirements. So that means that that motion, we can't deal with that motion today, or else it would be against our procedural bylaw and against principles of open government. So I'm going to suggest that somebody moves a motion for us to reconsider a notice to reconsider this decision of council at our September 20th committee of the whole. At that point, we can make sure that notice goes out to all the required people and delegations are allowed to come to speak to it. And at that time, we can also then provide direction to staff in an appropriate way based on what we hear at that committee of the whole meeting. So I'm going to ask somebody if they'd be willing to put that motion forward to reconsider this decision of council on the September 20th committee of the whole. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question, and then yes, I would make such a motion. Mayor, is it because this is a community delegation rather than a full agenda item that notice is required? Is that correct?
There's two pieces to that. One, that it is a community delegation, and we actually spent too much time on this. We probably shouldn't. It was probably my fault. We went around the room because I knew it was an important decision. We don't usually do that at community delegations. That's the first point. The second point, it's a big decision where we're being asked to reconsider a council decision already. So for those two reasons, it probably is the best way forward to have notice and have a real meeting.
Okay.
And it's on the agenda. Everybody knows about it, and everybody can come and register as a delegation.
I believe I heard yes. The fact that it's a community delegation helps trigger the need for notice. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we reconsider the decision for bike lanes on St. David at the September committee of the whole meeting, and that we look at other alternative routes and so forth.
So I just want to
motion to reconsider the decision made to be discussed at the next council meeting or committee meeting in September.
Okay, so I just want to make it clear, staff do not have time to come to the table with changes to what they've already done for September. If at the September 20th committee of the whole meeting, after we received delegations and community input, at that time, if council wants to direct staff to do something else, that will happen post September 20th meeting. Okay?
Fair enough, Mayor. I'd like to make the motion that we reconsider the decision at the September 20th committee meeting.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Foster. Seconder for that? Councillor McElwain, any discussion on that motion as it stands? Councillor Kittredge?
Thank you, Mayor. I support this motion, but I would like to know whether at the September 20th, if we could make a motion to direct the staff at that, when we had discussed this, to seek out an alternative, because this is a budget item that we're going to be coming up at budget time. And I just want to know what an alternative costs. And that's one of my big things. So I would like to know, you know, there's a lot of estimates that are done on budgets about how much it might cost. And I think that that can be done for a Provost Lane or any other alternative. So I'm just wondering, for September 20th, can a motion be made for that?
So on September 20th, there's going to be a motion to reconsider council's decision. Until council decides to reconsider, there'll be no work done. If council votes to reconsider and it's a 2/3 majority to get a notice of reconsideration, a motion of reconsideration to pass, if that happens, then the work that you are talking about will be triggered. But that's cart before the horse to say that we're going to be doing anything before. It has to pass a motion for reconsideration first. And at that point, those discussions and those decisions will have to be made. Any other discussion about this motion to reconsider on the September 20th Committee of the Whole? Okay, all in favor of that notice to reconsider? Opposed? And that carries 4-3. Again, thanks very much, Ed, for triggering that discussion and all the work that you've done on this.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Linton. For me, Mayor Linton, is that it now for today? I can sign off, or?
Yeah, you can sign off, or you could stick around and watch the rest of the proceedings, but you're free to go. That's all on that item.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks to everybody.
Okay, sorry, I just had to bring my schedule back. It froze up on me. Okay, so the first thing that we wanted to talk about after that is the addendum, the correction in the agenda, which was the Integrity Commissioner report on the inquiry for Councillor VanLeeuwen. Everybody received that report, hopefully. It was an addendum, so it came a little bit later. And just giving council, this was a significant cost to go forward with this. So I wanted to make sure that members of council had the opportunity to comment or ask any questions about this report. So I'm going to just go around the room quick. If you have nothing, you can just pass, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody on council had an opportunity to comment. So I'll start with Councillor McCray.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. All I have to say is I found Integrity Commissioner Giorno's report enlightening and thorough in his investigation, findings, and exoneration of Councillor VanLeeuwen. I support his decision.
Thanks, Councillor McCray. Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, I got a question. Can somebody give me the costs on this report?
I think person probably to ask that it would be our clerk, Carrie.
Through you, Mayor Linton, the total cost to date, I fully expect other invoices to come in, but what I have received to date is in the amount of $21,104.83.
So $21,000 for a report. I remember when we had this discussion and none of us were concerned that Councillor well, I wasn't concerned anyway, and I know the mayor wasn't concerned that Councillor VanLeeuwen was breaking any laws. We just felt that as a deputy mayor, he should be aligned with the thinking of the mayor in case the mayor got sick. And it was tied to removing him as deputy mayor was tied to having this report. And I said to Councillor VanLeeuwen afterwards, he would survive an integrity commissioner's investigation because he hasn't breached anything. It's his right. But I argued then that we shouldn't be doing this. And Councillor Foster, you refused to separate this. And here we are now, somebody who always, when we go to spend money, you've got something to say. Well, here you go. There's 21,000 you spent needlessly.
Councillor Kitchus?
Thank you, Mayor. I found the Integrity Commissioner's report very important and very fundamental in establishing, again, to this council, the freedom of speech. Everyone claims to be for freedom of speech, but their actions reveal otherwise. Being for freedom of speech in politics doesn't mean your own freedom of speech. It means other people's freedom of speech. And the actions of some people in this council have revealed that they actually are not for freedom of speech. And this is the second time in this term that the mayor and the majority of councillors have sought to punish unjustly a councillor in minority for the expression of their freedom of speech and opinion on a topic. This council voted Councillor VanLeeuwen out as deputy mayor with opinions that have been proven false by the Integrity Commissioner report. The mayor said Councillor VanLeeuwen was spreading misinformation, and he had to think like him on council, and that was proven wrong. Councillor Dunsmore defamed the character of Councillor VanLeeuwen and called him a danger to our community. In words as if he was a criminal already in his speech, he speculated that he would break the law possibly in the future. Other councillors speculated and were adamant that he broke the law when no charges were laid and no basis for the charges could be found in the Integrity Commissioner's report. Secondly, this council overturned a vote to defer judgment to remove the Councillor VanLeeuwen on the basis of the bad, biased, unfounded opinions and mob hysteria. Innocent until proven guilty under the law is one of the sacred principles of our judicial system, is a fundamental right, and this council broke that principle by removing Councillor VanLeeuwen before the Integrity Commissioner inquiry because of mob hysterical pressure and political opportunism. This is indisputably a bad decision-making process, and I believe it is bad decision and a poor form of governance. It reveals the true character of some of the members of this council. I wanted to have Councillor VanLeeuwen reinstated, but after talking to him, he said he really didn't want to be deputy mayor anymore. And I would like to know why he feels like that. And I would like to move that this council and specific members that wrongly accuse Councillor VanLeeuwen apologize to him at this meeting.
Councillor McElwain?
Thanks, Mayor. From the beginning, I fully support Stephen's right to have his own opinion. My complaint was then and remains that he should not have done it as the deputy mayor of Centre Wellington. As a person, he has every right in the world. As a representative of our council, I don't think he had that right, but I certainly, the report from the Integrity Commissioner is complete, and I have no problem with his findings.
Thanks, Councillor McElwain. I'm going to let Councillor VanLeeuwen go last. Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to start out, Mayor, by saying that my father put his life on the line defending the rule of law in the Holland Liberation Campaign with a rifle in his hand in the Rhine campaign, liberating Holland and standing up for the rule of law. And that was imparted to me at a very young age. that we must stand up for the principle in Canada of innocent until proven guilty. And rather than rush to judgment, I wanted to see that Steve had a fair and impartial hearing. And that is why, Steve, I fought on your behalf to have an impartial hearing. That's why I made the motion to have a hearing. And that's why I did not want to remove you as deputy mayor until you had the benefit of a fair trial. And that is why I made the motion. And yes, Neil, sometimes it does cost money. It costs money to prosecute criminals, and that is no reason not to undertake a judicial process. Justice and fairness, Neil, costs money sometimes. And that was money well spent, and Steve's now been exonerated. Sadly, in fact, Councillor Dunsmore and Mayor Linton, I believe you folks wanted to rush to judgment and remove the Deputy Mayor VanLeeuwen at that time without the benefit of a fair trial. That, friends, is bad politics. That's bad government. That contravenes the rule of law and the presumption of innocence, which we uphold in Canada as an essential principle. And that's why I wanted Steve to have a fair hearing. Now that Steve is exonerated, I second Councillor Kittrus's motion that certain members should apologize to Councillor VanLeeuwen. But I think we need to do more than an apology. And as a result, we need to right a wrong here. Steve never should have been removed as deputy mayor. He's been exonerated. He did nothing wrong. Commissioner Giorno undertook a very detailed review of the facts, and Steve has been exonerated. And as a result, I think we as a council have to decide how to right this wrong. And I believe we need to reinstate Councillor VanLeeuwen because he never should have been removed until the investigation was complete. And as a result, I'm making a motion that we reinstate Councillor VanLeeuwen as deputy mayor. He did nothing wrong. The report proves it. It's time to right a wrong and put him back as deputy mayor. If he's not willing to stand as deputy mayor, then we as a council should choose a new deputy in a fair and impartial manner. So motion made, your worship. We need to right a wrong, stand for good government, stand for the rule of law, and stand up for the presumption of innocence before proven guilty. And never again shall we rush to judgment.
I think I'll make a couple comments, then I'm going to leave the last comments for Councillor VanLeeuwen. I think there's still confusion among councillors about the role of the Integrity Commissioner, and that's pretty clear with some of the comments made, some of the rhetoric that has been shared today. Right from day one, one of the first people I contacted was Guy Journo, our Integrity Commissioner, to ask him about his opinions. And I informed council at that time that he made it very, very clear to me that this was a political decision. It's council's decision. He doesn't play a role. Council chose not to believe me and the telephone conversation I had with our Integrity Commissioner, and instead decided to spend $21,000 for the Integrity Commissioner to basically tell us months later in a report what I told council he was going to say anyway. There was no there was nothing that Councillor VanLeeuwen did that was contrary to the councillor code of conduct. That's what I said back in February. This is a political decision, and it's completely within the right of council to make the decision that we made. And if you did read the report, you would have seen that it says that in black and white in that report. So let's make sure that we read the report in its entirety. What our Integrity Commissioner again reminded us, as he did in previous reviews that he's done, that he is not going to police freedom of expression and political talk, regardless of the nature of that political talk. And he's not going to go there. We should have learned our lesson after the first time that we went to Integrity Commissioner, how he interprets his role. And again, he made it very, very clear. Unfortunately, it was at the cost of the taxpayer in this case. I was never in favor of sending this to the Integrity Commissioner because it's clearly outside of his role, and he made that clear in the report that you see today. This is nothing about vindication. This is nothing about people being right or wrong. It's the Integrity Commissioner making it clear that the nature of the questions posed to him are outside his role and responsibility of Integrity Commissioner. And he specifically looks at the Code of Conduct. And there's nothing in the Code of Conduct that Councillor VanLeeuwen did that in opposition to what our Code of Conduct states. That's clear, and that's it, period. Nothing more than that. Councillor VanLeeuwen.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this is quite a deep and intense report. I'm very thankful to have received the report, even though I was not looking for an integrity report. It clearly shows that I had conducted myself properly and with integrity. I think that is something, when you look up what integrity is, it's when you're not double-minded and you walk forward, you do what you say. And I think that that's important to me. And this report actually speaks towards how you even see the G7 leaders, they say one thing and they do another thing behind the backs, which really is not with integrity. And I find that that's very disappointing, and to be punished to live with integrity. One thing I see that the report goes through my social media accounts and emails with very, very carefully and quite intense. The conclusion is that, with few exceptions, my media posts were very factual. They were very accurate. This should make others take note, as I was accused of spreading that misinformation, and that was brought up already. But it was not just misinformation with questionable accuracy, but turns out that it is very creditable. And I would encourage people to read this information, and in this report, it's all written in there that you can see what you're not seeing in the mainstream media. And I think that that's very, very important. Read this report and realize that the information that is coming out can no longer and should no longer be spread as misinformation. I think that's very important to me, and also for all members of the public. And now here we have it in this integrity report. I also find it rather incredible and astounding that the province, by its own admissions, not tracking the effects of these lockdowns. That's I don't know, how do you govern with wise decisions, especially since we're into the 16 months from past period where they can't disprove what we're speaking about? That says something towards the integrity of what's happening within all these lockdowns. And I encourage people to take up and start looking at what I'm speaking about. But I wanted to also speak about, on a personal note, I'm saddened. I'm appalled by some of the private accusations made by some of the councillors in the report. This is not just about what happened on that day, but these accusations made by some of the councillors, they accuse me of private interests, business issues, police concerns, interference, and even down to my own faith and my faith in God. So I'd like to state in the open, because these accusations were made in private, that this is not a private interest. That my faith in God has created all people equal, and that's what makes me care. And God cares for them through Jesus Christ, but also that's what makes me care for the people. So I desire to make wise decisions to care for all people, and also to ensure that they can worship, work, that they can have families and have freedom to continue in Canada in this way. And thus I also desire to run my business that way, my family, and I like to walk with integrity every day. And that's why I'm going to continue to fight with this way. Councillor Kittredge had asked me the question, why would I not want to be a deputy mayor? Well, I can't be a deputy mayor if I am held back from walking with integrity, if I'm held back from speaking the truth. How can I be that? And I'm telling you today, I'm not sure that's what I'm seeing from the government. And we see that in this report. We see that when it comes to the G7 leaders. We see that with the information. So I'm disappointed. I would love to continue to act as deputy mayor with the freedom to speak the truth, but it does make me very leery when I'm punished for speaking that truth. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thanks, Councillor VanLeeuwen. Any final comments on this? Again, it's just received for information. We're just going to receive this for information. It was something that council asked for, and it's in front of you in black and white. So, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of points. Mayor, you yourself spoke about how you called and received oral advice from the IC. And we all know, and it's in the protocol, that to rely on the advice of the IC, any correspondence has to be in writing to be relied upon, and that was not the case. That's an important principle, that any complaining or advice be done in writing rather than orally. The second thing is, Steve's rightly pointed out that he does walk in faith and he walks with integrity, and this review even shows that and proves it. And I'm very grateful, Steve, that that's the case. But the facts remain. If Councillor VanLeeuwen did nothing wrong, then why was he removed? And that is why it was so important to me that he be given the benefit of a fair and impartial hearing before that decision was taken. So if he never should have been removed in the first place, then we have a chance to right that wrong and put him back there. He ought never to have been removed. And I make that motion that we reinstate Councillor VanLeeuwen. He never should have been removed in the first place until a thorough review could have occurred.
And I think, again, if I'm repeating myself now, but the Integrity Commissioner's report clarifies the role of the Integrity Commissioner versus the role of council, and that council had every right to make the decision that it made, and council did make that decision. So nothing's changed on that front. It's not about something that was done wrong. No. What's your point of order,
Mayor?
Councillor
I've
Foster?
made a motion, Mayor. It needs to be dealt with. I've made a motion to reinstate Councillor VanLeeuwen. Can we deal with that motion?
Yeah. So, your motion. It's not as simple as you make it sound. There's a bylaw in place. A councillor can't just move a motion forward. A bylaw is in place to remove Councillor VanLeeuwen as the deputy mayor. We went through another bylaw process to introduce Councillor Dunsmore as the deputy mayor. All that has been done. Councillor point of motion just can't undo that. It also requires my acceptance of it. So there's a number of things that I have to talk to the clerk about. This is out of left field again. This is not what we were meant to talk about. So you're causing me to do a lot of exercise here as far as our procedures bylaw goes. This was not on the agenda, but I recognize that you can put any motion forward that you want, whether it makes sense or not. So I'm going to again call a 2-minute recess and
Point of order, Mayor.
No,
Point of
just
order,
let
please.
me finish my discussion. I'm going to discuss with the clerk what happens with your motion, because I don't think it's in order, but I want to make sure I'm doing things correctly. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay, we're ready to come back. I'll wait till everybody's back. Okay, welcome back, Council. And for those of you watching this meeting on live stream, the reason that we keep stopping is that I have to ask for advice from our township clerk on some of these matters and make sure we're doing things right procedurally, because there's been a few different requests here. And we want to make sure we're being appropriate in how we're handling our meetings. So Section 226 of the Municipal Act talks about the deputy mayor position, and we're going to let our clerk bring out the relevant point on Section 226 of the Municipal Act.
Through you, Mayor Linton, Section 226 states, a municipality may, with the consent of the head of council, appoint a member of council to act in the place of the head of council on any body other than on the council of another municipality of which the head of council is a member by virtue of being the head of council.
Okay, so that's how it reads in the Municipal Act. I will not give consent as the head of council. I will not give consent. As a result, I ruled Councillor Foster's motion out of order, and we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. The next thing, we really should be receiving this addendum from the Integrity Commissioner for information. So I'm going to be asking for a member of council to move the receipt of this report for information purposes. Can I have a mover for that? Councillor
Point of
Mackler?
order, Mayor. Point of order, sir. I have a question. You didn't.
What's your point of order? Councillor Foster, please be precise.
We heard from the clerk about Section 226, Mayor. I'd like to know then, choosing a deputy mayor is a decision of council. If that decision is made, what then is the process for reconsidering a decision when it was clearly made in error? What is the process so we can reconsider such a decision? It's a council decision who the deputy mayor shall be, with the pleasure of the mayor. How do we reconsider it, sir?
Yeah, so we just went through that process, so
we
we
did
all
not.
should know what it is.
I mean,
To our clerk, I'll ask her if in broad strokes, don't get into everything, but maybe just repeat what we just went through a few months ago.
Through Mayor Linton, it is no different than the last reconsideration. You would be reconsidering a decision that you made. It would, again, I believe, in my opinion, it would require notice and 2/3 majority to repeal that bylaw. However, Section 226 of the Municipal Act indicates it must be with the consent of the head of council. If you do not have the consent of the head of council, then reconsideration, in my opinion, is moot.
Thank you, Carrie. So did we get a mover and a seconder to receive this for information? Councillor McElwain, who seconded that? Councillor Kittredge, all in favor to receive this report for information? And that is carried. Okay, moving on to 5.2. It's going to be a long day. 5.2, and that is a county council update. Again, we didn't really have any county council or any committees, so I have nothing to report on that front. I did want to talk a little bit about our August 17th meeting that I had along with our CAO, Andy Goldie, and Infrastructure Director, Colin Baker, along with our MPP, Ted Arnott, to meet with the Ontario Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks as a delegation during the AMO conference. This was our 7th meeting that we've had with this ministry, and it really is an indication of how important our water resources are to Centre Wellington. It was our first meeting with the new minister, David Pecuniary. It was a good meeting. The primary purpose of that meeting was to introduce the new minister to Centre Wellington, tell him about our concerns when it comes to water, and tell him about the things that we've actually done to protect our water in Centre Wellington, including the completion of a long-term water supply master plan. Secondary purpose of this meeting was to ask the minister to consider requiring municipalities to endorse any commercial water taking for the purpose of bottling permits for over 50,000 liters a day. Currently, the threshold is 379,000 liters a day before a water bottling company requires the support of the host municipality. We felt that we feel that that's too high. And so we really informed the minister that it's very, very difficult for us to explain to our residents that a water bottling company can extract water within our township when we know that we're going to have to spend millions of dollars of our own money to drill more wells for our growing community. We had a good discussion with the minister and his staff, and I think that's just going to be the first of several meetings with them. And it was really good to have our MPP, Ted Arnott, again, advocating for this community. So it was a good meeting, and I just wanted to inform council that took place a couple weeks ago. Councillor committee updates. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. I too attended AMO virtually, and I found it very useful and interesting. Lots of discussion about pandemic and so on. As for committee reports, Mayor, nothing significant to report. Seniors and Hydro both will be meeting in September. We'll have more details after those meetings. Thank you.
Councillor VanLeeuwen.
Sorry, no, I have nothing further to comment. It's good that you continue to have those meetings. Thanks for your work.
Councillor McElwain.
No committee meetings of any sort this month. Thanks.
Councillor Kittredge.
Nothing to report.
Councillor Dunsmore.
Thank you, through you, your worship. The BIA met and we had a healthy discussion on how they're preparing for coming out of lockdown number 3 and the things that they're doing. And I gotta hand it to the BIA. They are a hardworking group, and the downtown businesses continue to fight through this pandemic. We had a healthy discussion around the garbage issue down there. And through you, your worship, I want to let you know that the county staff were very supportive of my questions, and we're working through about a hybrid policy to help the downtown businesses and the downtown landlords with garbage. And I'll probably have more on that at the next meeting. There was a lot of discussion about Provost Lane, but I haven't had a chance to speak to Dorothy about it because she was on vacation and then I was on vacation. So I'll save that matter for another time. The hospital board, it is good news out of the hospital board. They have a new CEO hired. You probably saw the press release. And Angela Stanley, I want to officially welcome her to our community, and I'm looking forward to her leadership at the hospital board. The CSAC committee, you have stuff on the agenda from the CSAC committee coming forward today. And we were supposed to meet this week, but we need to get in council's decisions on these matters before we meet again. So that's all I have.
Councillor McCray.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. GRCA update. Some of the topics we discussed were province's proposed changes to chair and vice chair term limits, proposed redesign for the new Guelph Lake Nature Center, Provincial Offences Act new officer appointments, revised changes to the GRCA's Conservation Authorities Act, Section 28 hearing guidelines, Speed River Weir Rehabilitation and Bridgeport Dyke Rehabilitation Contract Awards. Staff also provided us a presentation on the water quality of the Grand River that has continued to improve since the 1930s through collaboration with the GRCA's municipal and agricultural partners. The GRCA's Rural Water Quality Program, improved fertilization practices, and municipal wastewater plant upgrades are examples of efforts that are improving the water quality. We learned that there are now 65 different species of fish thriving in the Grand River, and recently pickerel were being caught in Cambridge. So all good news.
Thanks, councillors, for those updates. Moving on to 7.1, our grant application policy for 2021. And we have a report from Dorothy Smith, our Manager of Community Development, Festivals, Culture, and Tourism. Welcome, Dorothy.
Good afternoon, through you, Mayor Linton. Our committee have been reviewing our grant application policy for quite some time now. And during COVID, we just seemed to have more extra time to devote to this policy. So we tidied up some conditions, we expanded others for clarity, and then we added a few new ones. I believe they're all highlighted in your report in red ink, but I just want to bring to your attention a couple of new items that we did add to the policy. One of them was for marketing is typically not an eligible expense, but we wanted to make it eligible for any new events or new projects in its first year. The whole purpose of this policy is to bring in new ideas, new events, new programming. So we felt it was important to allow for marketing for that first time event. We also included under the ineligible category is capital projects. We seem to be getting requests for those, and that is one item that is not eligible for this particular grant. So we made sure we outlined that in the policy. And applications that arrived late always seem to be a bit of a challenge, and so we just put it in the policy that we will defer those ones to council. It doesn't happen often, but there usually is one that comes in late. And then we seem to be getting some requests for our annual specific category. So I've got organizations out there that have been part of the program for a couple of years and wanting to know how they can get on to the annual granting process. So we defined that category a little bit clearer so that they have to be part of the grant program and show a history of the need for the past 5 years. So we felt it was really important to outline that in the policy. And then upon reviewing other municipal policies, we came across some wording that we really liked, and the committee wanted to ensure we put it in the policy. And one of them is that the granting of financial assistance in any way is not to be regarded as a commitment by the municipality and to continue such assistance in future years. So we brought that statement in. We thought that spoke very well. And it said, in addition, the municipality will not provide guaranteed funding beyond the current year. In approving grants, a municipality may impose conditions as we see fit. We really like that statement, so we want to make sure it was included. And then last but not least, if there is a surplus of funding, the committee was hoping that if there are other projects in the hopper summer, that they could make some recommendations for any funding that was left over from the grants. And that's pretty much it.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Dorothy. And a lot of these changes seem to make a lot of sense. And I know the contribution of the CSAC committee was important during this whole process. So thanks to your staff and the committee for going through this and making some changes that make it better for these organizations. Really appreciate that and the work of the committee. Councillors, Councillor McCray.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I appreciate staff and the committee's efforts in revising this document, and I certainly support it. Thank you.
Councillor Dunsmore.
Yeah, a big shout out to the committee. They did some good work here. They wanted to clarify some issues that they had questions about in the last process, and those have been changed. And I think it'll be a much simpler process moving forward. And thanks for your hard work, Dorothy.
Councillor Kittredge?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dorothy, for this report. I do have a question. In the clarification of the annual grants, if there are several people that probably have applied for 5 years and then they get on the list, perhaps, would there be, are you proposing having more monies go into the annual grant funds?
We're not recommending that at this time. What happens then is if we recognize there is a group that needs to be rolled over to the next category, the annual category, then we just adjust the funding what's available. We've just had that happen a couple of years ago with Big Brothers Big Sisters. We saw that there was a continual need for the same programming, and they have been doing it for year after year. So we just transferred that over and adjust the funding at the end of the day. But at this time, we're not recommending an increase in funding. Does that answer your question?
Councillor McElwain?
Thanks, Mayor. I have no questions. It's you clarified some things that have been gray for a while, Dorothy, so well done to the committee.
Councillor VanLeeuwen?
Thanks. No, I have no questions. It's good to take some of the concerns or issues that we've bumped into over the years and just clean up the policy. So thanks.
Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dorothy, for a very good report. I don't have any questions, Mayor, but I just want to affirm how important these grants are to various smaller community groups. They're critical sources of funding for various groups. So well done, Dorothy. I support this.
Okay, I have a recommendation here that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approve the recommendation by the Community Services Advisory Committee that the amended community grant application policy be adopted as presented. Mover for that, please, Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor Foster. All in favor? And that is carried. Thanks, Dorothy. Moving on to 7.2, MacDonald funding Allure sculpture project update, and I will turn it over to Pat, our Managing Director of Community Services. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. At the February 16th Committee of the Whole meeting, Council delegated to the Community Services Advisory Committee to review the status of the MacDonald projects. And this report is a summary of the work that CSAC has done and making recommendations from the July 14th meeting. The recommendation is to terminate the agreement between the Elora sculpture project and the Township for the MacDonald funding project. There was a thorough discussion with the chair of the Elora sculpture project and the members of CSAC. And after that, CSAC supported their request to no longer proceed with the project. The second part of this recommendation in the report would have Council delegate to CSAC the opportunity to take additional time to investigate options on how the funding could be used. I'd be happy to answer more questions. Also, Dorothy Smith has joined us today, so she can answer questions, but the report pretty much speaks for itself, and it's just a matter of now formally terminating that agreement and considering the future for the funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Questions from Council? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess, Pat, kind of a comment, maybe a question. Pat, have you, my belief, having served on this committee in the past, I'll use an example, Pat, rather than give a large amount of funding to one group, and I know that's not easy you get many requests for funding and all of the requests have merit, but have you considered, Pat, rather than giving one group a larger amount of money, the benefit of giving several groups a smaller amount of funding so that many groups will receive a benefit rather than one or two?
Just for clarity, Councillor Foster, you're considering the 25,000, which was part of the MacDonald funding, and having the committee just maybe look at separating that into smaller chunks. Is that your request us, we take that back to CSAP as your feedback?
Just as a consideration, yes.
We can
Or
definitely share that.
perhaps you have comments on it, Pat.
I'm not going to comment at this time. We're still collecting ideas from the community and other resources. It is a CSAC directive if council chooses to give it to them to make that decision. I'm not sure if Councillor Dunsmore has anything to add as the council rep when we get to him, but I'm not going to comment at this time. We're collecting ideas.
Andy?
Thank you, Mayor Linton, through you. So this did go through a committee and council, Councillor Foster with the previous council with regards to the funding that came out of the Jack R. MacDonald. The $25,000 was one of the smaller funding. There were a number of projects that Pat has reported on previously. So that was the will of council and the CSAC of the time based on the funding and the projects that were submitted to council. So the committee will take a look at this now. But what was recommended was thoroughly vetted by the committee, the CSAC through a number of meetings and council as part of the last term of council.
Councillor VanLeeuwen?
Thanks, Mayor. No, I have no questions. I'm glad to see that you're going to bring it back to the committee for reconsideration and come back with some kind of report. Sounds like the committee works through these projects pretty carefully. Thanks.
Councillor McElwain?
No comment.
Councillor Kittredge?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not really sure why they couldn't agree on a location. I just don't understand. That seems to be had been the big stumbling block here, and I don't understand why that happened. Can you explain a little bit more how that happened? Because obviously they went through a long process to apply for it and then be vetted, and then president stuff, and then the location. So why were the locations that the Allure sculpture ones not accepted?
Yeah, I'm going to turn that over to Andy.
Through you, Mayor Linton, Councillor Kittredge, the processes of this whole project, actually what the sculpture committee presented to the CSAC for the MacDonald Stewart Art or for the funding was actually a different project. And so it was actually CSAC that went back and they were looking, the sculpture committee was looking for a variety of different projects. And CSAC went back to them in last term of council asking about working with CSAC to do a memorable sculpture for Jack R. MacDonald. So I think at the beginning it was a little bit of an unclarity into the scope of the work and the location that occurred during those discussions that started off probably on a little bit of the wrong track at the very beginning. So I think it was a matter that sculpture committee had one project that they were presenting to CSAC. CSAC went back and made some alterations, pretty much a different type of application. And I think that's where it started off not on the same line from both perspectives.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Your Worship. This particular CSAC committee has been on the same page from the word go. They believe this is a great project. They're willing to work with any community organization that's out there that wants to help find a location to put this sculpture to commemorate Jack R. MacDonald and its contributions to the area. And there was a miscommunication at one point, and I understand that. And now we supported the sculpture committee when they said we don't want to deal with this anymore. And so we'll terminate that agreement. Our committee wants to look at it so we can find a place and find someone else to help us find this, because I think it's an important issue, and that's why they've asked for more time.
Councillor McCrae?
Thank you, Mayor Linton. I look forward to hearing CSAC's recommendations as to options.
Okay, I have a recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington delegate to the Managing Director of Corporate Services to invoke Article 3 and 4, failure to comply of the MacDonald grant agreement between the Township and the Allure Sculpture Project Committee, which provides a process to terminate the agreement as requested by the Allure Sculpture Project Committee on March 22nd, 2021, in their written summary to the Community Services Advisory Committee, and that Council allows CSAC additional time to review and discuss options once the MacDonald grant agreement with the Elora Sculpture Project Committee has been terminated, and consider options for how the $25,000 could be reallocated. Have a mover for that, please. Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor McCray. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much, Pat. Moving on to the Allure Rocks Hockey Club agreement, and I'll return things over to Matt Tucker, our Manager of Parks and Facility Operations. Welcome, Matt.
Good afternoon. Through you, Mayor. The Allure Rocks Hockey Club has provided hockey entertainment for just over 100 years for our community. Just over this past year, the Allure Rocks went through a management change. And just would like to update the current 2017 agreement. So the new management group is eager to work with the township to pay off past ice arrears. Just to note, they just had a successful golf tournament a couple weeks ago, and are really excited to get back on the ice, especially after taking a year off with COVID. So staff have been meeting with this group, and we feel that this updated agreement will be successful both for the hockey club and the township.
Great, thanks very much, Matt, and it's good to see new management group there, and looking forward to watching some hockey this year. Councillors, Councillor McCray.
I have no questions. I'm certainly in favor of this.
Councillor Dunsmore.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. Matt, I like your agreement. I like how you've worked with the new management group, and I'm happy to see we're moving forward with this. So good work.
Councillor Kittrus.
I have no questions on this, and I'm support this.
Councillor McElwain.
Ditto. I have no questions and I do support it. Well done, Matt.
Councillor VanLeeuwen.
No questions.
Councillor Foster.
I'm just speaking in favor, Mayor. It's putting a team on the floor. The ice is not easy in amateur sport, and I'm fully supportive of this. It's a good agreement. I wish the team well and that they can get this completed.
I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington authorizes the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with the Allure Rocks Hockey Club for the payment of ice rental arrears from past seasons. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor McCray. All in favor? And that is carried. Thanks very much, Matt. Moving on to 7.4, the snow drainage works, maintenance and repair for 2021. This is our drainage allocation, and I'll turn it over if our Manager of Legislative Services, Municipal Clerk, has anything to add to the report in front of you today. Carrie?
Through you, Mayor Linton, nothing much to add other than it is the Drainage Act requires the municipality to maintain and repair drains. Once council approves the work, notice would be given to property owners, the work completed, and then the cost is assessed to the property owners within the watershed.
Very prescribed process. Any questions from council? Councillor, we'll go around the room quick. Councillor Foster?
No questions, Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor VanLeeuwen?
No questions.
Councillor McElwain?
Thank you, Mayor. I should know this, I think, from the past, but when council is or as township has been asked to clean a drain, is that our initiative, or is that one of the properties that is using the drain that starts, that starts the process?
Through you, Mayor Linton, it's usually a property owner that discovers that the drain is plugged or impaired, and they request the drainage superintendent to take a look. And it's his recommendation to bring forward the cleanup.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor McElwain.
Thanks, Carrie. And after that, do other property owners have to agree to it, or is it just a matter of the drain needs to be cleared out and here's the deal, and you're going to pay your share?
That's exactly the way it works. Yes.
Councillor Kittredge?
No questions.
Councillor Dunsmore?
No questions.
Councillor McCrae?
No questions.
I'll read the recommendation of the Council of the Township of Center Wellington in accordance with Section 74 of the Drainage Act RSO 1990 CD 17 approves the cost of the maintenance and repair work to a portion of the snow drain located at the top end of the drain through concession 2 as recommended by the drainage superintendent at the estimated cost of $6,500. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor McElwain, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to 7.5, request for a proposal for a phone system. And I will initially turn things over to our Managing Director of Corporate Services, Dan Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor
Welcome, Dan.
Linton. Thank you. So this RFP relates to upgrading the township's phone system. This was a project that was identified as a need in the 2021 budget. We currently have an on-premise telephone system, and we're looking to move to a cloud-based system to provide some efficiencies and make our communication a little bit more effective from a township-wide perspective. We did issue a request for proposal. We had 43 registered plan takers, 20 responses, which was a significant number of responses to receive for any request for proposal. We had a selection committee comprised of 3 members of our IT team, as well as myself, evaluate all 20 proposals. And the selection committee's recommendation is to award the proposal to GoCo Technology Limited Partnership, as they had the highest scored proposal out of all 20. You'll notice from my report, there's a number of functionality requirements we required in the phone system. And we are actually utilizing a number of efficiencies as well with the new system. We are implementing Office 365 in conjunction with the new phone system, and that was identified as a separate capital project within the 2021 budget. Attachment A to my report includes the financial analysis of this RFP. We've shown it in 2 different categories. The first one is the initial implementation cost, which are considered all costs that we are going to be incurring in this calendar year, 2021. So that includes the purchase of any phones, the licensing, as well as the one-time implementation costs. And you'll see from that column, we're well within budget allocations. And the second column is what we anticipate for annual operating costs starting in 2022. And you'll see in there, we're anticipating costs of approximately $10,000 a year. And we're currently paying approximately $16,000 a year. So there's some savings ongoing as well from an implementation perspective. Also, just looking combined old system versus new system, there's a number of annual savings there as well, not just the actual phone system itself, but moving more to a cloud-based functionality means there's less on-premise costs, such as servers that are required going forward. So I think this is a good efficiency for the township in implementing a cloud-based phone system. So with that, we're looking to recommend award to GoCo Technology Limited Partnership. Our manager of IT, Jeff, is with us today as well to help with any technical questions.
Great, thanks very much, Dan, and thanks, Jeff, for being here. Questions from council. Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor, and I have a question for Jeff. Jeff, maybe you can enlighten me. Let me ask it like this, Jeff. In a nutshell, what is wrong with the current telephone system that would require this? Is it VoIP compatibility? What's the reason we do this?
It's end of life by Microsoft right now, and this is the replacement, is Teams. So in July of 2021, that system, Skype, became end of life. So there's no more warranty on it. There's no updates. We can go to the system at this point. So it needs to be replaced.
So Jeff, can you just, for us non-techies, can you just explain what end of life means? Because that sounds pretty drastic.
It is drastic in a way. So at the point we're at end of life right now means that basically Microsoft is not supporting this system anymore. So they do send out like Windows updates all the time to improve vulnerabilities that are coming to the system, which we can't get anymore at this point. So the phones that we own today, we cannot replace because they don't make them anymore. And same with the hardware that we have for our systems. They're not being updated anymore.
Thanks, that helps. Follow on, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Jeff. So to be clear, Jeff, I think when you hear the word telephone system, we all visualize the landline at a desk, but is that correct, or is it more to do with access using cellular telephones and accessing data through the telephone network rather than just improving ordinary phone calls?
Yep, what we have today is that it's both. So we do have communications that's data as well as phones. Today we don't have copper lines because the Bell system is not supporting copper anymore. Everything's going to fiber and over the network. So that's the direction we did 7-8 years ago. And all we're doing is uplifting our system. It's going to be pretty much the same system, but it's still Microsoft, and it'll allow us to communicate with everyone within the township the same way, collaborate with other municipalities who are on Teams too as well.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. One last question, Jeff. I just wondered if you have any comments on, I've heard discussion about security in terms of the cloud and so on. I wondered if you had any comments about data security with respect to going to a cloud-based system.
Yes, so we have probably looked into this quite a bit. My background is security because that's what I did before starting here. Microsoft's probably one of the best at this point for security, compared to going to a third-party company who doesn't have the capability of Microsoft has today, or the funding to do security on the background. So we've built our network based around security for the whole township, and that's what we continue to do. So we have multiple layers. We have firewalls. We have what we call endpoint security too, which every single desktop and every single laptop has software on there to protect us too. So not only if you're in our office or out of our office, we're protecting it in the same way. What's nice about this phone system putting into the cloud is, in case we ever go into an emergency like a pandemic down the road, we can pick up our equipment and go home or go to another safe location, and it's just plug and play. We don't have to go through a prem system we have here today. If this building loses power or ever gets wiped out, the township's not going to be in very good shape at that point for communications anyways.
Councillor VanLeeuwen.
Thanks, Mayor, and through you. Yeah, no, it's a good report. Thanks, Jeff, for giving some of those answers to Councillor Foster. I have nothing further.
Thank you.
Councillor McElwain.
Yeah, it's a complete report. Thank you, Jeff, and I have no questions.
Councillor Kittredge.
Thank you for this report, Jeff, and I don't have any more questions.
Great. Councillor Dunsmore.
Yeah, very thorough, no questions at all.
Councillor McCrae.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Thank you, Jeff. I'm familiar with the technology and software, and I certainly support the recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Centre Wellington Award request for proposal 17-21, supply, installation, and support of cloud-hosted telephone system to GoCo Technology Limited. Partnership as outlined in report COR 2021-49 dated August 30th, 2021. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor McElwain. All in favor? And that is carried. Thanks very much, Dan. Thanks very much, Jeff.
Thank you.
Moving on to 7.6, negotiated award for BioRem media replacement project, and I will again turn it over to Dan.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Before I go through the procurement aspects of the report, I'd like to have Dino, our Manager of Environmental Services, discuss the technical requirements.
You didn't want to try to do that on your own, Dan?
I'd rather not, but
Come
thanks.
on, I dare you. Welcome, Dino.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Linton. So the BioRem is the odor treatment system used at the Elora wastewater treatment plant, and it's exclusively provided by BioRem Technologies, Inc. The system is used to treat odors generated from the headworks and from the sludge storage areas of the plant. Air is drawn from these areas and treated through BioRem odor treatment system prior to discharge to atmosphere. The system involves a multi-stage filter. It uses a wet carbon media scrubber at the first stage, followed by a dry polishing stage. That dry polishing stage is the dry carbon media that we're replacing through this process. Studies completed in 2019 and in 2020 concluded that the dry carbon media of the second stage of the treatment process is spent and requires replacement. This work is expected to involve removal and disposal of approximately 47,000 pounds of original carbon media, inspection of the carbon vessels and repairs as needed, and replacement of the media with new carbon. Thank you.
You don't think you could have done that, Dan?
I was just about to say that's exactly what I was going to say.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Dino. In terms of the purchasing bylaw requirements, we are allowed to go to negotiated procedures if we have one source of supply for a product or service, or if a vendor is uniquely qualified to perform the work. So we're suggesting in this case that the vendor is uniquely qualified to do the work. If you look at the financial implications section of my report, we are approximately 35,000 over budget, and it is a project that is funded through the Wastewater Capital Reserve. So we would require additional funding of approximately 35,000 from the Wastewater Capital Reserve to move forward with this negotiated award. So we are recommending award to BioRem Technologies, Inc. at a cost of $255,205 excluding HST, and that the funding for the report be revised as outlined in my report.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Dino. Councillors, Councillor McCrae.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Very good report. Thank you, Dino, and thank you, Dan, for presenting this. I have no questions.
Councillor Dunsmore.
Yeah, again, it's very thorough. I appreciate the report from both of you, and I have no questions.
Councillor Kittrus.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the report. I do have one question. I was just wondering, Dino, what does the company do with the 47,000 pounds of carbon media? What's the process? Where is it dumped, and where does it go, or is it repurposed, or
Yeah. Thank you, through you, Mayor Linton. I believe, I can confirm this, but I believe that the carbon media is shipped back to the processing plant in the States. I think it's in the Detroit area, and it is burnt off and repurposed. I will follow up and confirm that, though. That's just what I believe happens to it, which I've read through various media magazines and that sort of thing, but I'll follow up with specifics to RSO.
Councillor McElwain.
Thank you, Mayor. Dino, a question. Within the last year, and I can't remember precisely when we were getting the complaints, but there were a number of complaints about odor at the O'Brien Park treatment plant there. Is this going to have any impact on that at all, or is this completely separate from anything that might happen downstream, so to speak?
Again, through you, Mayor Linton, this won't have any impact on that Clyde Street sewage pumping station. However, we do have a capital project proposed to council for approval for 2022 to address that issue separately, two separate issues.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. A question for Dino. Dino, what is the lifespan of that type of carbon filter, and has this one ever been changed out before, or is this the first time since the plant was new in 2011 or 12, I believe?
Again, thank you for your question, and through you, Mayor Linton, this is the first time this media will be changed out, and the lifespan on the dry filter is in the 5-year range. We've squeezed out a few more years, and we're at the point where we do need to change it out though. The lifespan for the wet media is approximately 10 years.
Thanks, Dino, for those answers. I have a recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington authorize the negotiated award for the Elora wastewater treatment plant BioRem odor control carbon media replacement to BioRem Technologies Inc. at a cost of $255,205 excluding HST, and that the funding for this report be revised as outlined in report COR 2021-46 dated August 30th, 2021. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor McElwain, seconded by Councillor McCrae. All in favor? And that is carried. Thanks very much, Dino. Thanks very much, Dan. On to 7.7, amendment to subdivision agreement plan 23T, Storybrooke West, and I will turn things over to our Managing Director of Planning and Development, Brett Salmon. Welcome, Brett.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. This is a report regarding Phase 2A of the Storybrooke subdivision. Council may remember that September of last year, they approved a subdivision agreement, and that subdivision agreement is for what they called Phase 2A. That agreement provided for an additional 267 dwelling units to be serviced. That's 152 single detached dwellings and 115 townhouses. That work proceeded after that subdivision agreement was executed. That work's close to being complete to get preliminary acceptance. And they'd like to move on with an additional 166 dwelling units, which would be 84 single detached dwellings and 82 semi-detached dwellings. So we reviewed the proposed lotting. We're satisfied with the lotting. We were satisfied with the agreement that we already had. So it only needed some fairly minor modifications, which the developer's lawyer has prepared and the township's lawyer has reviewed and agreed with. So that's what's in the agreement brought forward. We do need the lots. There's only 25 lots remaining for single and semi-detached units in the active subdivisions in Fergus. So the extra 166 units will add, and we'll have about a 2-year supply with these developments, lots being added. Just so you can see in the report, I've attached the full extent of the subdivision after the units are added. So if you look at the northern part of the map, you can see that it's an extension of Rhea Drive and Povey Road are the parts that they wish to add. So and then for your reference, you can see the original extent of Phase 2A. So you just see the addition of those 3 streets. And I should say that James Buyak, who is the Vice President responsible for development at Sorbera, is also on the call to speak to this item.
Great, thanks very much, Brett. And I will turn things over to questions, comments from council. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question, Brett. I wasn't clear from the report. Is this net new units being approved, or is it really more of a ratification of those that were previously approved? Sort of a
Through you,
finalized.
To Mayor Linton, the entire development has draft approval, as you know. So in total, there's about 1,500 units, I think, in total in this development. And they've constructed what they called phase one already. That had 222 units. The agreement that was authorized last September was to service the 267 units. And now they want to continue on and service another 166. But they are all part of the original draft plan of subdivision that was approved by LPAT. That's correct. And it's all within the maximum number of units that were in that plan.
Councillor VanLeeuwen?
Thanks. No, I have no new questions. This is a development that we've been seeing working away, so I'm glad to see it continue. Thanks.
Councillor McElwain?
I have no questions.
Councillor Kittredge?
I don't have any questions.
Councillor Dunsmore?
No questions.
Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Through you to Brett. I'm wondering, is there any opportunity, given the fact that we're concerned about our attainable housing stock, is it possible for us to ask the developer if he would reconsider switching out some of the single family dwellings for more of the semi-detached or even townhouses to try and bolster our attainable housing supply? The fact that this developer is further on in the construction process would give us an opportunity sooner to get some more of this attainable housing supply in our municipality.
Brett?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Linton. Well, James is on the call. He could maybe answer from the developer's point of view. What I would say to that, though, is that, this is a subdivision. It's been through LPAT. It has draft plan approval for the structure and the zoning that accommodates the unit types that they're proposing. There are a substantial number of townhouse units already incorporated into phase 2A. These units, because units can be marketed when they have draft approval, these units have already been marketed, and currently there's significant demand still for single detached homes, even though they're more costly for a number of people. I think if we want to have that argument, it may be in the future when they come and draft approval is close to lapsing and they need to extend the draft approval. When they get to phase 3, that might be a good time to look at a different mix of units.
Okay. James, you have a comment regarding that?
Yes, good afternoon, members of council. Again, my name is James Buyak. I'm with the Sorbera Development Group, and I'm appearing today on behalf of Sorbera Tribute Nigus Holdings, Inc. But through you to the councilor's question, it's a fair point. And we just want to make it clear to everyone that, notwithstanding that this phase of the subdivision was originally approved in December of 2018. At that time, the zoning had very deliberately been structured to allow us to respond to market conditions as those conditions evolve. And so notwithstanding, at the time, we may have envisioned a plan that was principally composed of single detached dwelling units. We've all seen the market change and continue to evolve, and affordability is a reality that we are responding to. And so with the expansion of the scope of the servicing permissions through the subdivision agreement that were previously approved, and with the layout of this expansion, we have in fact incorporated semi-detached units where otherwise single detached units had been contemplated. And so I think that's a positive move in the aim and interest of the point that the councillor was making. And further, I mean, you haven't seen anything to this effect yet, but staff and ourselves have already been discussing the composition and layout of what will be the next phase of this subdivision. And again, notwithstanding that when originally conceived, it was composed principally, actually entirely within this next, what we call phase 2B of single detached units. We are able to work within the flexibility of the LPAT approved bylaw to incorporate semi-detached and townhouse units, and that is absolutely our intent. So I hope that when council see us next time looking for either an expansion of this subdivision agreement or a new subdivision agreement, you will be pleased.
Thanks, councillors. I will read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Centre Wellington authorize the mayor and clerk to execute an amendment to the existing subdivision agreement pertaining to phase 2A of Plan 223T 16003. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor McCray, seconded by Councillor McElwain. All in favor? And that is carried. Thanks very much, James. Thanks very much, Brett. Moving on to 7.8, tender award amendment, tender 11-21, construction of municipal services on St. David Street. And I will turn it over to Dan again.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. So this report relates to tender 11-21. It is a tender that was already approved by council, and we're seeking an amendment to that award. Before I go through the purchasing aspects, Adam, our manager of engineering, is here to discuss the scope of work.
Thanks, Dan. Welcome, Adam.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Linton. Thank you, Dan. Through you, Mayor Linton. The township and staff at the township have been participating in discussions with the owners of the property located at 961 St. David Street North in Fergus. And this property is located within the project area of tender number 1121. So the landowners of this property, who we understand have interest in developing the property, have expressed interest in extending municipal services, sewer and water services to their property through our contract. And I just want to note before I turn it back over to Dan, that authorization to proceed, so the authorization that we would grant the contractor to proceed is still contingent on a number of items. So the first is the council endorsement that we're seeking today to amend the current contract. The other item is that we need to receive from the MTO an amended encroachment permit to complete the work. So that has been requested but has not yet been received. Finally, we would need to complete a service finance commitment agreement with the landowners and receive the required deposit from the landowners to complete the work. Finally, once all that information, all of those items have been completed, we would need to confirm with our contractor that all the work can be completed within the current construction schedule. I'll turn it back over to Dan.
Thank you, Adam. So the original tender was awarded to Network Sewer and Water Main Limited. They have been contacted and have agreed to add this additional scope of work to their contract. You'll see from the financial implications section of the report that we would require a developer contribution of approximately $781,000 to fund this amendment to the scope of work. There would be no additional financial implications from the township. So the entire amendment to the tender award would be funded from the developer. We would require an amendment to the scope of work with Network Sewer and Water Main Limited, as well as the service financing commitment agreement that Adam referred to move forward with this amendment. So we are recommending award of the amendment to Network Sewer and Water Main Limited.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you, Adam. Questions from council? Councillor McCray.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. I have no questions.
Councillor Dunsmore.
No questions.
Councillor Kittredge.
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering how long the extension for this would be for time, or is it a new permit?
Go ahead, Adam.
Yes, thank you for the question, Councillor Kitcherson, through you, Mayor Linton. So we have a permit to take water to de-water to complete this project, and that permit to take water expires at the end of this calendar year. So our expectation is that all work has to be completed within this calendar year, or we start to run into issues with that permit to take water.
Councillor McElwain?
No questions, thanks.
Councillor VanLeeuwen?
No questions.
Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. I do not have any questions.
Okay, I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington authorize the request for tender award amendment tender number 11-21 regarding the construction of municipal services at St. David Street North, Highway 6 and Side Road 18, Fergus, as outlined in report COR 2021-51 dated August 30th, 2021 to be funded from developer contributions. Mover for that, please. Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor McCray. All in favor? And that carries. Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break. Some of us need it, and we'll come back here at 3:20, and we'll start at 7.9. Well, welcome back, everyone. I'll just make sure that we have everybody back here. Okay, just waiting for Councillor Foster. Councillor Foster, you back? There we go. All right, so we ended at 7.8. We'll go into 7.9, request for proposal for a new well exploration, and turn it again over to Dan.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. So this is a request for proposal 22-21, new well exploration. Adam will be going through the technical requirements again.
Thanks, Dan. Welcome, Adam, again.
Thanks, Dan, and through you, Mayor Linton. So a key recommendation of the Water Supply Master Plan was to carry out a new well exploration program to identify and confirm new sites for future municipal water production wells, which are needed to accommodate growth to the 2041 timeframe in the township. So this study is to satisfy that requirement. So the major components of the study will include reviewing background information, identifying drilling sites within the preferred areas that were identified in the Water Supply Master Plan, developing a detailed work plan for drilling and testing, prepare and submit either permit to take water applications or environmental activity and sector registrations for the well drilling, or for the well testing, sorry. Prepare technical specifications for the drilling, coordinate and oversee drilling and testing activities in the field. Finally, analyze test well performance, confirm their suitability as future supply wells, and then prepare an implementation strategy, high-level cost estimate to construct the new wells and connect them to the township's water supply network. I'll turn it back over to Dan. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. So we had a request for proposal for this initial work. We had 13 registered plan takers with 3 responses received. We had a selection committee made up of the Managing Director of Infrastructure Services, the Manager of Engineering, and the Manager of Environmental Services review the 3 responses and are recommending award to Stantec Consulting Limited at a contract price of $344,053, excluding HST. You will see from attachment A that there are other future phases to this project, including a construction stage at a later date, but we are well within cost allocation estimates based on the approved budget for this project. So we are recommending award to Stantec. I do like to point out before I finish my presentation here that this project was shown as debt funded through the budget process. But it is debt that is funded 100% through development charges going forward. So the payments would be funded exclusively from development charges.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Adam. Councillors, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. No questions. Thank you.
Councillor VanLeeuwen.
No questions. We've known that this has been coming, and it's good to see a good start at going finally.
Councillor McElwain.
Thanks, Mayor. Adam, the fact that new well or a well would be have issues being too close to the Middlebrook well. So there's some kind of a separation required between existing wells. Does this have a negative impact on where they can test for new wells? Would it change if the Middlebrook well was no longer in question? I'm just curious.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor McElwain, and through you, Mayor Linton. So one of the components of this study is to look at the potential for well interference with existing wells and existing permits to take water. So that's something that we would evaluate through the study. We would have to see, when we select these locations and we test them, if we are seeing any of those interference impacts. And if we were, then we would have to plan accordingly. So it's Probably a bit too early to say, but that's something that we will look at through the study.
Councillor Kitchus?
I don't have any questions.
Councillor Dunsmore?
No questions. We've been expecting this. It's good to see it get started.
Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Linton. No questions. It's great to see we're moving forward with this.
Great. I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington award request for proposal 22-21, new well exploration to Stantec Consulting Limited, and a total upset limit of $344,053, excluding HST. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor McCray, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to 7.10, application for toll booth for the Elora firefighters. And you have a report in front of you. This is good to see this again. Lisa's available for any questions, comments from members of council. And I'll turn it over to members of council. Any questions? Comments? Okay, I will read the recommendation of the Council of the Township of Center Wellington authorizes the mayor and clerk to execute a bylaw authorizing a fundraising activity in the form of soliciting by a toll booth on Metcalf Street in Elora on Saturday, September 18th, 2021 from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. by the Elora Firefighters Association on behalf of Muscular Dystrophy Canada. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Foster, second by Councillor VanLeeuwen. All in favor? And that is carried. Thanks so much to our Elora firefighters for doing this yet again this year. And everybody be sure on September the 18th on a Saturday to drive on Metcalf Street in Elora to contribute to this toll booth. 7-11, request for proposal 32-21 Wells F7 filtration system. I will turn it again to Dan.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. We'll start off with another introduction from Adam.
Yes, thanks very much, Dan, again, and through you, Mayor Linton. So the raw water pump from Fergus Well 7 has iron concentrations that are above the aesthetic objective of 0.3 milligrams per liter, and that's in the interior drinking water aesthetic objectives. So in order to reduce these iron concentrations in the treated drinking water, the township has retained an engineering consulting team led by C3 Water to identify a preferred option for treatment and to assist with the design and procurement of a solution. So through this study, it was recommended that a chemical oxidation filtration system be installed at F7 to reduce these iron concentrations in the treated drinking water. And this report relates to the award of the equipment being supplied for that treatment system. And I'll turn it back over to Dan.
Thanks, Adam. We had an RFP for this project. There were 13 registered plan takers with 6 responses. We had a selection committee comprised of a number of infrastructure services staff, as well as the environmental consultant that's been assisting us with this project. And the team evaluated all 6 proposals and are recommending award to Magnor at a contract price of $240,590.90. which includes provisional items and contingency, but excludes HST. You'll see from attachment A that this is another project where there are future project phases in association with this project. We are well within budget allocations for the entire project, and I'd like to point out that the project is funded 25% from development charges and 75% from the Water Capital Reserve. And just a note on the reasoning why we're significantly under budget, I believe through discussions with infrastructure staff that the change in the type of system resulted in a more efficient construction. So maybe if we need to, infrastructure staff can elaborate on that. But based on where the proposed costing was when we were setting the budget, we're well within that.
Great. Adam, are you prepared to elaborate on that? Because I think all members of council would like to hear a little bit behind that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Linton, through you. So originally we had been assuming that this would be a biological treatment system, which would have been a larger footprint, a larger equipment, and would have required substantial building modifications to install. As we went through the process with our consulting team, it was identified that we could use a chemical oxidation system instead of a biological system. So smaller footprint, more streamlined design, fit better within the existing building footprint, and therefore resulted in less cost than what was estimated.
Great, thanks very much for that explanation. Members of council, Councillor McCrae.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. I have a couple of questions. The first one is, what is the anticipated life expectancy of this product?
Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor McCrae, for the question. Through you, Mayor Linton. Good question. I'm not exactly sure. I know that the kind of the governing factor is similar to the air filtration system at the Elora plant that Dino was speaking of. There's actually a filter media that's included within the filter. It's a green sand filtration media. And that media needs to be replaced periodically. And that depends on the concentration of iron in the raw water. So it remains to be seen. But from what I understand, that media would need to be replaced periodically. And the system itself has, I think, quite a long life expectancy. If I had to throw out a number, I would say in the order of probably 30 or 40 years for the system itself. Whereas the media, perhaps we're looking at more, 5 to 10 year kind of replacement window.
Okay, thank you for that. My second question is, reflecting on the challenges associated with replacing the F7 Packers for a manufacturer, how difficult will it be to get replacement parts for this unit? Is it a local manufacturer within Canada, or are we looking at international?
Yes, so thanks for the question again, Councillor McCrae. Through you, Mayor Linton. So that was actually a big factor in our evaluation of suppliers, was that we wanted to ensure that we had a supplier that could get us the replacement parts within a 24-hour time frame. So that was part of the evaluation. So yes, we are confident that this company can supply parts within that time frame. They're based in Quebec. However, we understand they have distribution and service technicians located in Ontario. And they did commit in their technical proposal to meeting that 24-hour turnaround requirement.
Thank you, Adam. That's good news.
Councillor Dunsmore.
Yeah, that's really good news that we have a Canadian company and we're going to get parts so quickly, but I have no questions though.
Councillor Kittrus.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a question. Just like the last proposal and this one, when we're approving this budget item, does it guarantee that the same company gets the rest of the whole anticipated project costs?
Dan?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Kitchers, through you, Mayor Linton. No, it's the future phases for these proposals will go through a competitive procurement process. So there's no guarantee of any future work beyond what's being awarded today.
Councillor McElwain?
No questions, thank you.
Councillor VanLeeuwen?
No questions.
Councillor Foster?
No questions.
I read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Centre Wellington award request for proposal 33-21 supply of well FPH7 iron filtration system to Magnor at a total upset limit of $240,000, $590.90, including provisional items and contingency excluding HST. Can I have a mover for that recommendation, please? Councillor McCrae, second by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And that is carried. Thanks very much, Adam, and thanks very much, Dan. 712, application for noise bylaw exemptions. And we have a report from our Supervisor of Customer Service and Deputy Municipal Clerk. Any questions for Lisa? Councillor McElwain?
Thank you. My concern is only that one of those 2 evenings is a midweek event, and the facility is right beside working folks. So although there's a noise bylaw exemption, is there some kind of a restriction on how loud the noise exemption can be or anything? And particularly midweek. I mean, the Saturday one is different, but for midweek, it's a little bit of a challenge for some.
Lisa?
There is nothing in the bylaw. It just is the time that they are permitted. If council so chose, they can reduce the time that it's being requested or approve them separately and only allow the weekend. That would be up to them. The recommendation has been written in a way that you can pass them both at the same time or pass them separately.
Any other questions from council? Okay, I will read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approves the request from Justin Perchalak for an exception to bylaw 5001-05, the noise bylaw for the Township of Center Wellington, to permit the amplification of music at 7248 Wellington Road 21 in Eris on September 4th, 2021 between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. for the wedding reception, and that the applicant ensure neighboring property owners are notified in advance of the event, and that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approves the request from Darla de Membrio for an exemption to bylaw 5001-05, the noise bylaw for the Township of Center Wellington, to permit the amplification of music at 7248 Wellington Road 21 Eris on September 8th, 2021 between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. for a wedding reception, and that the applicant ensure neighboring property owners are notified in advance of the event. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor VanLeeuwen. All in favor? And that is carried. Thanks, Lisa. Moving on to 713, part lot control exemption bylaws. And I'll turn it over to Brett.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. This is a part lot control exemption bylaw for 6 lots that are in the Grandwood Gate subdivision, which is Plan 61M 235. And the 6 lots in question are intended to be for semi-detached homes. And so the end result of passing this part lot control bylaw would be that the 6 lots are divided into each half of a semi for a total of 12 dwellings. We've given grading approval for 3 out of 6 of these lots, and the other ones will come in when building permits are issued, but they have closings this coming month in September on the lots that are already under construction. So if we pass this bylaw, then it goes on to the County of Wellington. County of Wellington have staff delegated authority to approve the bylaw. From there, it gets registered on title, and then the transfer to the future owners can take place. And my report has the reference plan attached, so you can see the lots in question.
Great, thanks, Brett. Any questions from council on this? Councillor Foster? Councillor VanLeeuwen? Councillor McElwain? Councillor Kittredge? Councillor Dunsmore? Councillor McCray? All right, I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington give 3 readings to a bylaw to exempt lots 54, 55, 69, 70, and 71 and 72 of Plan 61M-235 from the part lot control provisions of the Planning Act. Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor McElwain. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to 714, consideration of report draft plan of subdivision 23T. And I will turn it back over to Brett.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. This is a consideration report for draft plan of subdivision 23T 18005, which is in Inverhaw, known as the Pasture Edge subdivision. You can see a large number of people have joined the call today. We have the developers consulting team from Astrid Kloss, Angela Kretsch, and the developer himself, Steve Wright, is on this call in case there's any questions after I deliver my report. And I know that Steve Wright in particular would like to make some comments at the end of my report. So just by way of background, we've got a draft plan of subdivision application here that includes a total of 40 lots. It's in Inverhaw, so there's no public sewer and water there. So each lot will have its own individual private well and septic system. The lot sizes range from just under 2,000 square meters to more than 3,000 square meters, which all comply with the zoning bylaw. The developer's application came in late in 2018, and there were a number of reports attached. That includes a planning report, an overall grading and servicing plan, functional servicing report, a hydrogeological study, a noise study, an environmental impact study, and a transportation study. And I've attached to my report the planning report that was prepared by the applicant, which you can see. The application was circulated and agencies have a chance to comment. We held a public meeting in July of 2019. And then subsequently, the developer made some modifications to the reports and modifications to the draft plan of subdivision, made a resubmission in June of 2020. And so we're now bringing this report forward because township staff are able to recommend draft approval with conditions. My report has my planning review attached. I've concluded that it conforms to the county OP. It's consistent with provincial policy. And so I believe that the applicant's done everything they can to address the policy framework, as well as all of the comments that were made during the circulation process and at the public meeting. But I did want to highlight a couple of things in particular, and I'll note that the applicant did include and attach to the report, there's an addendum report whereby the planning consultant goes through all of the comments that were received, and they're addressed in that report. So you can see in the addendum how the different comments raised over time have been addressed. But the one thing in particular that came up at the public meeting that were more of a staff responsibility to address related to two items that I want to raise here. And that one was with regard to pedestrian connectivity within Inverhaw in particular. And I just wanted to note that our latest servicing standard requires a sidewalk to be provided in these rural estate subdivisions. So the subdivision that is Swan Creek that's currently under construction, the engineering plans for that development have a sidewalk on one side of the road, and there'll be a sidewalk internally to this Pasture Edge subdivision. We have made a connection point to the Quarry Drive subdivision through a pedestrian walkway that could also be future emergency access. And there is some potential through land acquisition for that for there to be connections made internally to Inverhaw Road, if that was something council wanted to pursue in the future. In addition to that, when Side Road 4 was paved last summer, I believe it was, there was a little bit of provision made for white lines on the side of the road, a little bit of extra pavement that's outside of the white lines, not maybe to the extent that we call it, a pedestrian path or, but there is that distinction made now between the traveled portion of the road and the shoulder. So I think that addresses the pedestrian safety to the extent that the development can. There's a trail system proposed internal to the development as well. The other question that came up at the public meeting was our policy, our practice with regard to the provision of parkland development in a rural estate subdivision. So I've gone back through some of the historical records of the rural estate subdivisions that have been approved in Center Wellington, and as well as going back through some of the pre-amalgamation municipalities. And for the most part, there had been park blocks taken pre-1990, I would say, but anything that's come forward subsequent to that has not included a park block for active development or active park development. None of the existing subdivisions in Inverhauer in particular contain an active park block, and the Swan Creek subdivision that's now under construction doesn't contain an active park block, and we took cash in lieu of parkland for that. So we've included a condition related to satisfying the township with regard to parks, but there is no park block proposed in this development, and I would anticipate that we would take cash in lieu of parkland to augment our cash in lieu of park fund. But having said that, there is a considerable amount of land here that if you look at the map of the plan, there's a considerable amount of land that is public that will be conveyed to the township as public open space in the form of the stormwater management areas, the open space blocks where the significant wetlands are located. So there's a total of at least 3 blocks of land that will be conveyed to the township and can be used for passive recreation. Those total 0.077 hectares, so it's a significant amount of land. Well, a total more than that, sorry, nearly 3 hectares. So it's a significant amount of land. So again, my point is that the developer's done everything they can to address the comments that have been raised, and I hope the comments I've made with regard to the pedestrian connectivity and the parks and open space answer some of the questions that were made at the public meeting. And perhaps before we move on to questions, Mayor Linton, we could hear from the developer.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Brett. Steve and your team, if there's any comments that you would like to make at this point, now's a good time.
Thank you, Mayor Linton, members of council and staff, and any members of public that are present today. Thanks for the opportunity to bring forward this exciting development and for the consideration for approval of the draft plan. Astrid, of course, from Astrid Cost Planning, and Angela Croce from GM Blue Plan are here to answer any technical questions, and I'm happy to talk about the housing for sure. Brett's report to council is complete and comprehensive and is a reflection of our team's hard work over the last 4 years. I'd like to add that we are in agreement with the draft conditions that are being proposed of the approval, and we can be trusted to execute accordingly. The homes that I'm planning to build will be in keeping with the rural residential zoning, and it will provide us with a good opportunity to build executive style homes incorporating many of our energy efficiency requirements to constitute the net zero ready homes that you have seen in our Grandwood site. Our net zero homes are consistent with the national policy for reduction of carbon emissions and should be encouraged when an opportunity for development like this presents itself. We employ many, of course, local trades and suppliers with the growth of this community and housing needs, and many of these businesses we employ are expanding their businesses, hiring and developing many young trade professionals. Our work with the co-op programs, both at the high school level, college and university, is attracting good young people to our company. And also encouraging them to live in the area and retain our youth for good job opportunities. I hope we seriously consider it, and I look forward to and trust the council will have the confidence in favor of moving forward with this draft plan approval. And we're here to answer any questions.
Great, thanks very much, Brett. Thanks very much, Steve. I'll turn things over to questions from council. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a quick, short question and a longer question for Brad or perhaps Stephen Wright. First of all, Stephen, just in terms of the metric area, I just want to confirm when we say 2,000 or 3,000 square meters, that would be roughly half to 3/4 of an acre, I believe. I wondered if you could confirm that, Steve or Brad. Am I in the right ballpark there?
Yeah, through Mayor Linton. Councillor Foster, good question. Yes, they are all slated to be minimum of half acre, and most of them are approaching close to 3/4 of an acre.
3/4, okay. Thank you, Stephen. And my second question is in respect to, Brett, you mentioned passive recreation, and I know there's some wetland there. And I'm just thinking about the, on St. George Street East, there is a stormwater management area there, but it's also very flat and it's suitable for passive recreation. Quite frankly, it almost is good enough for a field, a sports field. So I guess I'm wondering, Steve, if, you know, as Inverhaw grows with, it's getting to be a larger hamlet now. When we say passive recreation, do you see, it may not be a bona fide park, but could the public spaces be used for children to play upon in a safe way? Like, could it be similar to the one on St. George Street East? Or I understand there's some wet areas in there. Steve, I wonder if you have any comments? Looking for a place for children to play ball, that's all.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Foster, and through you, Mayor Linton. I think we'd be limited in space for anything such as large as a baseball diamond or soccer pitch, Councillor Foster. It was more the intention for passive pedestrian footpath through the stormwater management areas, and it could be extended, as it was mentioned earlier, over to Inverhaw Road. But as far as any fields or anything, we're working with, of course, our environmental constraints with regards to the property. We have to make sure that we not encroaching on any of the identified areas for natural habitat, which I think a field or a baseball diamond would rather be challenging to include. So it'd be a great idea and I'd love to, but I think it would be more suitable for pedestrian and passive use.
Okay.
If I may add to that, through you, Your Worship, it's Astrid Claus. I'm the planning consultant. I would note that, as Brett has said, there are stormwater management areas and the open space and a whole network of trails and sidewalks that are being proposed here. And it is about 2.9 hectares of stormwater management area and about a 1.5 hectares of open space, so about 4.5 hectares in total lands that will be conveyed to the municipality. And looking at the plan, there may be the potential for between lots 39 and 40 with the frontage on Street A for a tot lot or something along those lines. Having said that, that would be obviously at the municipality's discretion. These are larger lots. They have a lot of private amenity area on each lot. But if there was a desire for the municipality to provide a small recreational space, that's something that the township could certainly do. And they will be in ownership of those lands in the future when the plan is registered. So thank you.
Councillor VanLeeuwen?
Thanks, Mayor. I have no concerns with this this plan, and I do think I like the fact that there's some larger lots there for some larger families to grow onto and stay within the community. So I'm good with this. Thanks.
Councillor McElwain?
Thanks, Your Worship. I guess I had one question, Steve. You mentioned about being able to connect to Inverhaw Road, and that would imply crossing Swan Creek, and that doesn't sound particularly positive. That's number one, it's protected, but number two, it's going to put a lot of traffic into a lot of foot traffic or bicycle traffic or just human traffic into what is currently a pretty well protected green space. So when you say connect to Inverha Road, how do you anticipate that happening?
Thank you for the question, Councillor McElwain. That would be directly through onto Side Road 4 and the bike path and the space that's available with the extension of Side Road 4, particularly, not so much through Swan Creek unless there was some sort of agreement with the municipality and some of the landowners over in that area. But I was particularly thinking of connection over to Side Road 4.
Okay. Follow up, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Side Road 4 is the second part of the question, and it came up before, and I think this is probably more of a question for Colin than anyone right now. It's too busy. It still is not well delineated. It's got too much truck traffic. It is unsafe for children to walk there. And I get more complaints about Side Road 4 than anything in Ward 2. It's just an unsafe road for pedestrians. So what has been done is not good enough. Is there any thought or plan of doing something better?
Yeah, through Mayor Linton, thanks for your question, Councillor McElwain. So formal sidewalks, curbs, and storm sewers, those weren't included in the asphalt resurfacing project that we completed last year. We did widen the shoulder, so we did add, just under a meter of pavement, and then also the white line, as Brett mentioned, as part of the resurfacing project last year. And I can understand, the concerns from the residents about vehicle traveling speeds and the amount of vehicles using the roads. But in terms of traffic calming, we did test out, as you know, some of those center line flexible bollards that show the speed limits. And this seemed to be a good candidate location for them. So I think what staff will be bringing forward in the not so distant future will be kind of a more of a traffic calming policy for council to consider, just to see how we can slow down that traffic on roads such as Side Road 4, just to make them a little more safer, whether it's a car leaving the driveway or the local residents out for a walk on the shoulder, just to slow that traffic down. So that'll be something that'll be coming forward to council in the future.
Thanks, Colin. You mentioned the flexible bollards, and I think they are proof of what I say about too much traffic and too many trucks, because they get knocked down almost as fast as you put them up out there. They just don't last because there's too much traffic and too many trucks. And kids are pretty much less flexible than the bollards.
Councillor Kittredge?
Thank you, Mayor. I like that we're adding more subdivisions with larger lots out in rural, but I have some grave concerns about us taking parkland monies for this subdivision and not having any sort of facility for even smaller children to play anywhere or people to meet. I think I really feel that the developer and staff should consider these stormwater areas in a different way. There has to be some sort of policy where you have all this land. I see the one in Fergus, when you're going to the rec center, and it's just empty. It's all you're doing is cutting grass forever. And so I just wonder, is there any intention to maybe come up with some creative solutions for providing this space, and it's there and it has potentials, but you know, for parkland and social connectivity to multi-use it as both the storm drainage area and public recreation. So is there any plan to do that in Center Wellington? Because I see that this will happen over and over again, where you have these swaths of property for the storm, but there's nothing public for the people in that town, in that area. Is there any possibilities of that? I mean, I guess it's directed both to Colin and Steve working together.
Yeah, and I would have said that's kind of between Brett and Steve. Who does anybody want to? It's not completely specific to this, but there is an aspect of this plan that Councillor Kittredge is talking to. Anybody want to take a stab at that? Brett?
Sure. I mean, I think if the subdivision received draft approval, then of course the next stage is a more detailed design. And so we've heard the comments today, and we have to, every stormwater management area is different in terms of what the grades are and what you can and can't do depending on the design of what the plan is. I think Astrid Kloss already pointed out that there's maybe a little bit of opportunity that she sees between some of the lots. So, between the senior management team, we talk about Pat and Colin and I, we get together and talk about the detailed design as well. And we'll do that with the developer's agent and see what we can fit within the stormwater management areas.
If I may add to that as well. So the way condition 15 has been worded, it's quite flexible. It just speaks to satisfying the parkland dedication requirement. It doesn't specifically say land or cash in lieu. I am aware of some circumstances where stormwater management ponds are used as skating rinks, for example. So there's a recreational component to them. In some municipalities that is allowed. In other municipalities, in addition to the trails, there might be a gazebo or a meeting spot or a park bench or something along those lines. Having said that, of course, this is land that the township will continue to own and maintain. So that has to be something that they need to be in support of and willing to do. Now, the cash in lieu money could be allocated to potentially to some of those works if that was something that the municipality wanted. So I think we're willing to, through the detailed design process, certainly speak more about this and see what can be done.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, no, I think you've done your homework here, and it's a good subdivision plan, and I'm happy with it. Got no questions.
Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Stephen, I appreciate your responsiveness to the public's comments and how you've addressed them. I like the fact that you've got more connectivity for pedestrians going through your subdivision and connecting with JM Quarry Drive. I guess the observation I have, and this is to Brett and to you as well, is just as this hamlet continues to grow, it's going to be important to provide pedestrian connections linking the various subdivisions to achieve more of a community feel. From the township's perspective, how do we connect residents on Inverhaw Road to JM Quarry Drive and similar Inverhill Road? We're building a sizable hamlet, so one will assume children are going to be wanting to visit their friends in different parts of this hamlet. So how can we create safe corridors for them to use other than Side Road 4? Like you mentioned, there's an environmentally protected area between your subdivision and Inverhaw Road. Has anyone considered reaching out to the GRCA to see if it's possible to at least have a little footbridge built over the Swan Creek and have a pathway that people can use to connect Inverhaw Road without having to go through Side Road 4? I mean, maybe this is something more that the township needs to be looking at as opposed to you as a developer. But I just like to put it out there. How do we start thinking about more pedestrian linkage for all the people living in this community? Because it is growing and becoming more of a community. And I don't want to see people hopping in cars to go around the block to visit the next door person.
Brett, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think Councillor McCray did understand as he spoke that this was a greater issue that the township can look at, as opposed to relying on the developer, obviously, to provide those kind of connections that are outside the area of the land that he owns. So if we're to make connections, then that means the township is acquiring permissions or acquiring more land or easements or whatever to connect. But I think, I mean, if you look at our hamlet areas, they all have, you know, and the largest of them is Bellwood. There's very limited sidewalk connections in Bellwood. Imbraha, historically, I think there's an expectation if people wait for the bus on the county road. And in new developments, we get conditions from the school board that speak about safety. So we do what we can inside the new subdivisions. And we are taking a look, as a result of the comments that were made, at the interconnectivity. But obviously Side Road 4 bisects the hamlet, and there's not a lot we can do that doesn't involve at some point somebody crossing Side Road 4 if you want to get from, call it the south side of Side Road 4 to the north side.
Councillor McCray?
That's something we'll look at.
I was just thinking related to Side Road 4. I mean, obviously the need for traffic calming measures to try and slow down the traffic as it's going through the hamlet. But maybe something for the township to consider in the future is maybe building a multi-purpose pathway along the side of Side Road 4 that would allow people to be a little more separated from traffic going down the road. It's just something I'd like to put out there for us to consider as this becomes more and more of a larger hamlet.
Thanks, councillors. Good discussions here. I'll read the recommendation. The Council of the Township of Centre Wellington recommends to the County of Wellington that proposed draft plan of subdivision 23T-18005 be granted draft approval subject to the conditions set out in staff report PLN 2021-23. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor McElwain, seconded by Councillor McCray. All in favor? And that is carried. And thanks very much, Brett. Thanks very much, Steve, Angela, Astrid, for coming here today and explaining some things to us. Appreciate it. Going on to section 8, we have a couple information items. One, capital project status as of June 30th, 2021, and then the operating results as of June 30th, 2021. Either of those documents, anyone have any questions for staff? Okay, there's no decision, they're just for information. Okay, moving on to our bylaws. We have four bylaws there. I have a recommendation that bylaws 2021-39 through 2021-42 be read first. A second, third time and pass signed by the mayor and the clerk and the corporate seal affixed. Mover for that, please. Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor McCray. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to motions where notice has been given. And at this time, I will turn it over to Councillor McElwain to introduce the motion that he presented notice of on July the 26th, 2021. Over to you, Councillor McElwain.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll read the motion first, and then we can have I'll add a few comments. Whereas the Black Lives Matter movement, acts of hatred based on Islamophobia, hate crimes against Asian Americans, and most recently the discovery of more than 1,000 unmarked graves of Indigenous children at residential school sites, have highlighted the need for reaffirmed commitments to confronting racism and removing system barriers to equality. And whereas the Township of Centre Wellington believes in inclusion and diversity and strongly opposes all forms of racism, and whereas racism and discrimination in all forms are behaviors derived from our background and our community, And whereas municipal government can play a leading role in helping to achieve equality, and whereas Centre Wellington is a diverse and accepting community, and we should celebrate and promote our diversity. And whereas Centre Wellington's social media, publications, and website are deficient in representation of visible minorities. And whereas the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities Guideline booklet states, having early and active involvement from the community will result in increased ownership of the plan of action and lead to more tangible success. Support from the community stakeholders ensures continuity through changes in elected officials and encourages the overall sustainability of your initiatives. And whereas it is recognized that the development of a well-designed inclusion and diversity strategy plan will take time and require community engagement. Therefore, be it resolved that staff draft a policy, develop an inclusive social media and publications policy, and further, that staff create a citizens committee to provide well-informed expertise and resources as the basis of a community inclusion and diversity strategy that that addresses the inclusion of Black, Indigenous, people of color, women, persons with disabilities, newcomers to Canada, the 2S LGBTQIAP+ community, and other visible minorities reflective of the community and the issues they are trying to address. And further, that staff consider drawing upon resources such as advancing equity and inclusion, a guideline for municipalities, FCM's Diverse Voices Toolkit, and the Canadian Commission for UNESCO Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities, and further, that the funding and resourcing for the development of an inclusive social media and publications policy and the forming of a citizens committee be presented to council as part of 2022 budget planning. So just as a little bit of background, all of council received an email from a citizen in June of 2020 stating and including photographic evidence of our lack of diversity in our social media and publications. And at that time, I went to Kerry and suggested that I thought this probably should go through the CSAC committee versus me doing a notice of motion, and Kerry agreed. And so I went to CSAC. They weren't meeting at that time. And after they started meeting, of course, we were no longer allowed to talk to Pat directly. So I was communicating through Andy, and things just kept getting delayed until, and many things happened in the world around us during that period. And so I thought it was necessary that we proceed. And so I decided to go with the notice of motion. So I did ask Andy to review it. He made some suggestions. I incorporated some of them into my notice. And that's where it sits. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Councillor McElwain. I'll turn it over to questions from council. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. My question for Councillor McElwain, Kirk, if I'm understanding, the motion primarily, Kirk, is regarding making sure that we show a more diverse citizenry on our social media and on our website. Does it speak also to racism more generally in the community, Kirk, or maybe you just clarify it for me?
Sure. First of all, since I submitted this notice of motion, we're getting a reasonable amount of representation on our social media of non-white, if you like, people. And so there's been some success already, just given that has happened. The overall, though, I mean, so that only addresses, though, a small part of this. It's the second part of my motion is that we form a citizens committee to develop an overall plan of action to address diversity and inclusivity in the township overall, and not just social media.
Councillor VanLeeuwen?
Thanks, Mayor. Kirk, I appreciate your motion here, and this is a sensitive subject, obviously, because nobody promotes hate, and we want to ensure that everyone's included. So I speak to this, your motion, with a level of sensitivity for sure. One of the things I fear in this in the motion is, we speak about inclusion, and one of the difficulties is when we talk about inclusion, we start then moving towards the category of listing race. First, we speak about racism and not wanting to see race, and then in the next point, we begin to break everybody into separate race categories. And I'm a little bit afraid that once we break and walk down that process, we start to exclude because we forget somebody or we forget a different area. I notice there's, just reading this motion, I can notice groups, ethnic groups, different religion, faith groups. There's many that are not included in here, that all of a sudden we could say we're being exclusive and excluding. So I'm more inclined to say that our HR department should be constantly looking at what we do when it comes to ensuring that we have no excluding statements within our policies to speak towards, we can't hire for any particular reason other than qualifications towards. But I'm not 100% sure. I can honestly say, Kirk, or Councillor McElwain, I read through some of the objectives, and they seem they're good objectives in a certain sense, but I'm not sure where we would get to and what we're looking for with what kind of a document, because realistically, I'm a little bit confused as to what this document would all look like in the end. So perhaps maybe if you could reach out and show me some policies where we're contravening some of these, or if we have other areas where you feel that we're not doing a good job, there's got to be something that has kind of triggered this for us to spend money there and really focus. I don't know, it's a difficult one to say, but I don't really see what triggers this. Thanks.
We'll go around the room, Councillor McElwain, and then I'll let you respond to anything you want, okay? Because there might be, so I don't want you to have to repeat yourself several times. So, Councillor Kittredge.
Thank you, Mayor. There's been a lot of things that have happened over the summer since this notice came out. One particular thing that's happened is that in Canada is like 57 churches and have 21 burnt down and the rest been defamed. And there was an Islamic attack of Islamic family. And so I would like to make a friendly amendment of adding to the wording so that it would read community, visible minorities, and all religious faiths to the notice.
Okay.
We'll
go through. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor McElwain. You might have a quick answer to that.
I do. I think it's a great idea, and both Councillor VanLeeuwen Councillor Kittredge have mentioned it, and I think it's a very valid addition to, and a more inclusive statement with that in there. So yes, I agree with that.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, when it comes to things like this, and Kirk, thanks for bringing the issue up because it's needed, particularly in today's society. But I know that when a lot of municipalities approach this issue, they do one of two things. They hire consultants who are experienced at this, or they turn to staff who have expertise at this, particularly when it comes to workplace diversity and inclusion. And I think we've just recently hired an HR manager who has some expertise in this. And I would like to make sure that he is involved in this, that Rashid understands what we're after, and he takes the lead on this. And when it comes to stuff like this, I don't want it to be a political gesture. I want to understand what it is we're trying to do and make sure we include everybody, including accessibility, that we get staff. And again, I'm going to say, I think Rashid has some experience at this, and I think he should be a lead on this, but we have to put budget numbers to it. So get staff to bring the budget forward for what that is, and also have the staff come forward with what the terms of reference would be for a citizens committee. Because the one thing that we have discovered is having committees here in the township that don't have a good solid terms of reference for, we just spin our wheels. So those are my comments. I would like to make sure that Rashid is involved in this because he has experience at it. We have to put budget numbers to it so it has some teeth for us all. And we have to have the expertise that makes sure nobody gets left behind on this. We need to do it right.
I'll wait.
Councillor McRae?
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Councillor McElwain, reviewing your motion as well as your suggested reading raised several questions and a note of caution. My first question, have you identified all forms of marginalization? Missing, for example, are economical, religious, medical, housing, military, and age. If we are sincere in tackling this challenge, we need to tackle all forms, not some of them. No one should be left behind, and we should ensure a fair opportunity in life for all. My second question, do you have an ultimate vision of what you seek to achieve or a deadline for achieving your vision? These are essential details staff require to develop a policy and determine your citizen committee's focus and background. I felt your motion lacked the necessary vision, detail, and clarity to assist staff in preparing their policy. As the chief architect, you need to provide a better layout of your idea and design for others to follow. My third question, do you support the hiring of additional staff to achieve your ends? Based on the suggested reading, this effort requires significant staff time if you want the initiative to succeed. The township is running a lean staffing model that makes it challenging to allocate current resources. My note of caution, a concern with any diversity initiative is choosing the wrong approach that inadvertently leaves people resentful of diversity policies and efforts, closing minds and reinforcing barriers. So I suggest resist the quick fix to allow sufficient time to determine the appropriate framing of your efforts to avoid the us versus them pattern. You will need to understand the causes and solutions of diversity backlash, as diversity and inclusion are highly personal, emotionally charged topics. Sometimes our best intentions can prove more damaging in the end.
Thanks, councillors. I just had a couple comments, then I'll turn it over to Councillor McElwain. I absolutely understand that we have to do our part as local leaders to make sure that we're 100% inclusive at the township. We have to lead by example. Any barriers that currently exist that mean that we're not 100% inclusive of need to be dealt with and we need to provide some leadership there. And we have to make sure that if there's any barriers, those barriers are removed. So I completely understand that we have to take the leadership role on that one. And it is my assumption that our HR manager, Rashid, should be taking lead on this, and I think he probably has plans to do so. I think we recognize that for the township as an organization, we have to make sure that we demonstrate leadership, and I think our HR manager, as was mentioned before, already has some good qualifications and can make sure that our approach to this is really, really, really good and comprehensive and solid. My preference for this, something that's this important, is that it comes through a staff report rather than a motion. And I think it's needed for several reasons, very important reasons. Firstly, we have to do a bit of a current assessment. We have to identify what needs to be fixed, what needs to be improved on. Then we have to make sure we understand the scope and the objectives. What do we need to accomplish at the end of the day? What outcomes do we want to see? And then that drives towards what the cost is going to be. What's the level of staff resources that are required? And how much is it going to cost the taxpayer? What kinds of resources do we not have currently at the town that we might have to hire? So as far as costing goes, that requires something like this to go through the budget process. And all good things that we do for citizens and businesses to make their lives better, whether it's rebuilding our infrastructure, whether it's establishing our parks, managing our water resources, all these core services require councillors to pass budgets. And I see this motion, this initiative as no different. If it's something that's a strategic priority for us, we have to make sure that we put budget to it, and it has to go through that budget process, and it has to be accompanied by a staff report that clarifies the current assessment, the scope and objectives, and the cost going forward. So I like the initiative. I think it's important for us to be leaders, but I also like going through it using an appropriate process. So I might be much more pleased with going through a process that requires staff to provide some of their expertise. Councillor MacLean.
Thank you. Well, some excellent comments. I think the first thing that I would suggest is that I am not anyway suggesting here that we need any plan of action within our staff, within the township staff themselves, that isn't already in plan. What I am suggesting is that we need to have a plan of action for helping guide where the township can help promote diversity and equality outside of our own staff, because I think that our own staff have a plan in place already. So I'm not suggesting to redo that. Although our HR manager would be a great resource. The other, as far as hiring and such, yeah, that's probably required eventually. A lot of places are already hiring, but there's an awful lot more smaller towns like ours that are forming citizens committees, as has been recommended by the Canadian Commission for UNESCO Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. And I put the quote in there specifically saying that they recommend that you have involvement from the community before you try to develop your plan of action. And so until you have that citizens committee formed, and perhaps led by our HR manager, as I said a year and a half ago, I was taking this to CSAC as a staff resource to bring it forward and to get some action. But things have changed, and I understand that. But waiting until we hire consultants to come in and do the job for us is putting the plan of action before the citizens committee, and I think that's wrong. I mean, we have citizens committee for growth, we have citizens committee for economic development, and they have terms of reference developed by staff. Well, I'm suggesting the same thing here for community diversity and inclusivity. So that's, and adding religious faith to the recommendation is valid, but we need representation from all of those different diverse groups in a citizens committee to work together and say, you know, what is going to make you feel more comfortable. I mean, we heard a lot last year during Black Lives Matter of local students who felt that, you know, they felt it was racist in Center Wellington. Well, what can we do to improve that? My son is half Japanese. He looks Japanese. He grew up with a lot of racist comments, particularly in when he was into sports. And we as a community can impact that. We don't have to hire a consultant to do that. We have people living in the community that can help do that. So I just think that starting with a committee of local people from diverse backgrounds can help us move forward before we get into hiring consultants and developing the actual plan of action. There, I've said it. I have nothing else to add.
Any other comments from council? Councillor Dunsmore?
Well, I want to be clear then what it is we're voting on. Are we sending this back to staff to come up with a report to tell us how we're going to proceed with a diversity plan, both internally and for the community, and then develop the terms of reference for a committee? Is that what we're doing? Or I just want clarity so I know what I'm voting on.
I was not suggesting at all that staff come back with a plan for diversity in staff within Center Wellington staff. I was talking more of a plan of action for a diversity plan within the community. And yes, putting together terms of reference for a committee.
Okay, so we're asking staff to put together the terms of reference for a citizens committee to address diversity and inclusion within the township of Center Wellington.
That's correct.
Period. Okay, thank you.
Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Linton. You know, I'm not opposed to this motion, but what I'd like to recommend is it would be great if Councillor McElwain could meet with Rashid to discuss further what his vision is and what he's trying to achieve. So Rashid can sort of consider, well, what needs to go into terms of reference? What is it that we want staff to focus on a policy? And then we can get an update on what specifically this notice of motion is going to focus on. There's some things here that still aren't clear. I think there's a lot that Councillor McElwain has in his head in terms of what he's looking for. It'd be nice to get him and Rashid, our HR director, together to just flesh that out a bit more.
Bob?
Councillor Kittredge?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it is suggesting that staff draft the policy and has further recommendations of a committee. And if it adds what I would like, which is the inclusion of all religious faiths, I think that that's a starting point for the HR.
Sorry, Councillor Kittredge, I think you muted yourself halfway through that.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. Let me just start. Well, I think it says that we want staff to do this policy, and also that they help create the citizen committee. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm just, for myself, I'd like to have the addition of all religious faiths in there. And that's sort of my concern. And I think that, I don't think anybody here in this room is against this. And so I think that there are citizens that are concerned about this, and we should show them that we have a policy that includes them and that they can be included in the decision making. That's all. I think that it's a positive thing.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. Kirk, what I'm hearing you say and just thinking about the things you have said and some of this discussion, I feel, Kirk, like this, your intention is this is a citizen-led initiative rather more so than a staff one, and that it's all about making sure our community is a safe and a welcoming place for persons of all creeds. Much more so than the need for additional staff, much more so than the need for additional dollars. Am I correct, Kirk? This is really citizens on a committee working to make sure we're an inclusive and safe and welcoming community. You have any comments, Kirk? I want to make sure I understand.
Sure. Well, you're right. That it is intended to be citizen input to get started. Staff, we would need staff to develop a terms of reference, as in any committee. And that terms of reference might even get edited by the citizens committee as it goes forward, because this is going to be new for all of us, right? It's not there's no group of people out there sitting in Center Wellington saying, boy, I know exactly what we have to do here. It's going to be an iterative process to come forward with a valid plan of action. And then we were going to need staff / consultants or whomever to put the plan of action in place. So it's not a fast process, and it's not all citizens, it's not all staff. It's a combination, but it starts with citizens, except for the terms of reference. And by the way, I would be more than happy to sit with Rashid and talk about it, Ian. So not an issue there.
Councillor VanLeeuwen.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, so if we're looking at a policy here that's trying to say that all groups, regardless of where they are in life and who they are and their backgrounds, are allowed to go to the arenas, the sportsplex, play in the games and the teams, that we encourage local groups to also reach out and include all different manners of people, then I have no issues with this. I do think that we run into issues if we are asking for a promotional side of things, where we look at it and say, no, we need to try to take on every effort. I think that there's areas that we're going to have difficulties with. And so I like the inclusion part of it, Kirk, where we speak about that and even have staff review and go through our policies. One thing I would like to also add in there, especially when we speak towards medical and medical status, that we need to ensure that our policies do not have any discriminating against vaccinated and unvaccinated people. Thanks.
Councillor McCray.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. Councillor McElwain, when I was discussing about the possibility of having to hire additional staff, I'm speaking from a perspective where I've been involved with several different citizen groups that have been interacting with staff, trying to get assistance in some of their different projects. And one of the challenges that they've run into is staff don't have sufficient time to justify having, say, a dedicated spokesperson representing staff and interacting between the different citizen groups. So where I'm coming from is just reviewing the material you asked us to read. There's a lot of work involved that is going to require staff time, in addition to what committee members will be able to do. But you still have this person who's got to be that interaction between the Citizens Committee and the rest of staff, sort of like what we have with CSAC, where we have Pat as sort of that staff representative who works with CSAC and brings back things to the Township Council. with this committee you want to form, because it is an important committee within this community, is we're going to need a staff liaison person working closely with them, which is going to require time. What I'm thinking is, I know there's another group that's interested in coming before council to talk about, is it possible to get some money for a liaison person to work with them? Maybe there's opportunities with a number of these different groups to get a liaison person who can work with your committee, can work with a couple of these other citizen group committees. That's all I'm thinking of, is this is going to require time.
Councillor
I guess-
McLean?
Yeah, yes, it will require some time. I think that it's minimal time in the short term for staff to develop a terms of reference and get a committee put together. I think one of the things that I guess I did include in here was the list of 3 different toolkits or guides that have been used by different organizations to develop this kind of a diversity plan. So there is a fair amount of work already been done by others that we can use as background here. It's not, we don't start from, from nothing. So I don't think it's, I guess what I'm saying is that we have some tools here that will help us get started. We have people in the community that can help us get started. And so to sit back and wait until we have a budget item for a consultant or something of that nature is not, in my mind, the best way to handle this. And I think we should get moving fairly quickly, and with the knowledge that it is going to be an evolving situation, and we're going to learn as we go, and we're going to have to probably change the terms of reference and etc. And it's going to take some number of years to get to where we want to be. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but I think we have to get started sooner rather than later.
I just would like to caution council that because this is a notice of motion and our staff don't speak or haven't been prepared to give us an indication of how much time and effort it would require to put a committee together with the terms of reference and oversee that whole public promotion of a new committee that it takes. We're making an assumption that it's not much time. That's a big assumption to be making. In my mind, it's not enough to effectively get this off the ground. This initiative is too important and too sensitive for us to not have things figured out as far as our scope, our objectives, and what we want to see at the end of it. We're talking about a lot of different things here, and I'm not sure we're all talking about the same thing. Councillor McElwain is talking about a community-wide inclusion policy that gets into other organizations, that gets into other service groups, that gets into a lot of different components of our community. Others are talking about what are we doing as an organization. That's more within our sphere of influence. And that's where Rashid would come into play, is within our organization and being a leader within our organization. That's in our sphere of influence. So we're talking about a number of different things. And until we have that clarified, it's going to be really, really difficult to establish an approach, establish objectives, and establish what this is going to take as far as our staff and their resources and what they're potentially going to have to drop in order to do this. And that's the danger of moving forward with something like this as a councillor notice of motion. So I'm concerned by that. I'm concerned that we're making a bunch of assumptions and we don't know the answers to it. And it's not good enough to think that those assumptions are accurate and think that everything is going to work out because we initiate something that sounds really good. We have to be thinking about the details. We have to be thinking that this is actually going to work, because once we raise people's expectations, we better well deliver. And that's the challenge I see with not going through a staff report initially and not going through a budget process. We're not making sure that we identify this as a priority, say over something else that our staff are already tasked with doing, or over something else that we're going to require staff resources for. That's why we have a budget process. My feeling is this has to go through the budget process. We're not that far away, and we have to do this right. Councillor Kitchus?
I was wondering if we could maybe defer this and have a staff report at budget time for a for the things that are included here, so that we can hear from staff, and then we can address the motion at that time.
Are you moving that motion of deferral, Councillor Kitchus?
I think that I would like to hear from Rashid, since he will be a part of it, I gather. I mean, and so I'm just, yeah, I would like to hear about that. So I don't know, like a timeline. Today's August. Well, budget is, so maybe the end of October. I don't know whether that's enough time, but at least an understanding of what, and then staff could say what they have to say. But because you're right, unfortunately, the way the procedure bylaw was, that staff can't comment.
So I just want to be clear. You're putting forward a motion to defer to October, end of October. And can we get so you've put that on the table, Councillor Kitchus. Can we get a seconder for that? There, in a deferral is not open to debate, so we just have to go through this. A seconder for that motion? Sorry, Councillor Kitchus, did you want to refine what I just said? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yes, I'd like to have a staff report about this at that same time. I mean, defer, but then have a staff report.
So that's okay. So that's a referral to staff then. Okay.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. I got my cheat sheet here, so I'm just looking over if you wonder what I'm looking at. So that's a referral to staff to. Do we have a date for that? Is it the? Yeah, end of October. But can we get a date for that? What's the? So the October council meeting, a referral to staff at the council meeting in October.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it a seconder for that, please? Let's get a seconder, and then we can. Councillor Dunsmore, any discussion about that referral? Councillor McCray?
Yes, I was just wondering if we could refine that to emphasize that staff will reach out to Councillor McElwain to just discuss further his motion to ensure they've incorporated his ideas into this report they'll be bringing forward.
Okay, yeah, that will happen as part of this. That'll be a part of this. So you're on record as to saying that, and Andy's on record nodding his head. Any other comments about this referral, Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. My question would be, is there something that needs to happen so that this becomes an agenda item and so that staff can speak freely to it and not have the matter restricted to council only as a notice of motion? Is there something
Yes, that is correct. At that point, it can be debated by council. There can be delegations, all that kind of stuff.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Okay. All in favor of that referral?
Sure.
And that is carried. Thanks, Councillor McElwain, for that notice. Confirmatory bylaw, that bylaw is 2021-43 to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held August 30th, 2021 be introduced a first, second, and third time and pass in open council. Mover for that, please. Councillor Kittredge, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? That's carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Kittredge, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And we are adjourned. Have a good rest of the day, everyone, and we'll chat soon.